We got GMO crystals in this world.
Oh, unbelievable.
What the
Meteoric iron is understood by the Rosicrucians as the stone of Michael. But of course, Archangel Michael is not actually a young blonde man in a suit of armor. This is a non-physical being of a very vast level.
The sword implies to me the sword of discernment.
I'm going to stand in integrity and I'm going to do that.
Interestingly, like the cross could be a sword if you flipped it upside down.
Who and what is the Christ being? And in the early Christian understanding, Jesus and the Christos are two separate things. Jesus seemed to really be connected to this force of Michael. Absolutely. There is a universal spectrum of energy that contains all the possible energetic functions that could exist. Orange has the power to purge toxic energy out of the human energy system.
Oh, this is getting real exciting because we're going to go from colors into gemstones next.
Yes, we have all this incredible potential, but we can be activated into it.
Dr. Robert Gilbert is like a living library of Alexandria. He has synthesized the best of Western and Eastern traditions with all of the esoteric and wisdom school traditions that have all surfaced in what he calls now the Michaelic Age. And the Michaelic Age comes from Archangel St. Michael, and it goes through the processions of the equinoxes. And what does that mean? My middle name is Michael, and I know very little about Archangel Michael. And in this podcast, we explore the deeper cuts and deeper meaning of what this archangel represents and how to actually flow with the current of the time that we're in, which includes the fierceness of the discretion of the sword, along with the kind of Christic actualization of the sun energy, which is represented by Archangel Michael. We follow that thread into the universal vibrational spectrum, which is how the one light breaks into all of the many different colors and how each one of these colors can be useful not only for the physiological body, but for the etheric body, for the subtle energy fields. This includes red lights. Many of us use red light therapy, but that's just for the physical body. What do blue lights do? What do green lights do? What does the 12th hidden spectrum of light, negative green energy, how can that be utilized and harnessed to actually propel us in our own journey of transformation and growth? From the colors, we move into the crystals and the gemstones of our beautiful world, far beyond what you might find at that woo-woo crystal shop along the way. He goes deep into the stone medicine traditions of the ancient Chinese schools of knowledge to really help us understand, how do you clean a crystal? How do you charge a crystal? Which crystals are used for which purposes? Which stones carry which natural properties? And how can they impact us in a positive way? Or, if we're not careful, a negative way. From the crystals, we move into the metals, what the metals represent as actual physical representations of larger cosmological energies. This podcast is going to blow your mind. It blew my mind. It was one of the most exciting episodes I've ever been a part of. So it is with great enthusiasm and pleasure that I share with you this podcast with Dr. Robert Gilbert. Robert, it's so good to have you back.
It's great to be back. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Our audience loved our first interview, and this one, we're going deep. We're going into a lot of different subjects that I've found personally incredibly interesting and also very applicable to my own spiritual practice. So I can't wait to dive in. And the starting point for me was when I read from you that we're in the Michaelic Age, which is St. Michael, the age of St. Michael, and really understanding the paucity of information that I actually had about St. Michael. I mean, I know what he looks like. He's got a sword, and I know he's kind of a badass in the archangel realm.
Yeah.
But I don't actually know that much about St. Michael. So I guess one of the questions is, who determines that it's the Michaelic Age? Which system is it from? And then who is St. Michael?
Great. So I think it'll make things clearest for people if we start from like a big picture and come down. That's the only way that I can understand things, is to see the larger context and then go to the specific. So today we often have an idea when we talk about non-physical beings, spiritual realities, that we either have a abstract intellectual type of structure about how these things work, like there's different ranks of angelic beings. But again, it stays abstract and intellectual, or we think of it as some type of a metaphor rather than a living reality. So we need to take the same understanding we have of a human being having multiple levels. So for anyone who is conscious at a metaphysical level, who understands things holistically, we have models in different traditions about the different levels of structure of a human being. It's not just the physical body, which is examined in Western science and medicine. There's also an energetic body, whether you call it chi or ki or prana or ether, body of life vitality that actually animates and gives life force. Then you have the emotional level, you have the mental level, causal karmic level, spiritual level, and the divine level of the one everything comes from. So just as the physical plane is like the tip of an iceberg of a much larger reality that is not physical and is not visible, so when we understand the invisible worlds and all the different spiritual beings, they are a manifestation of something much larger. So there's the original understanding in the Western tradition that there are 9 ranks of spiritual beings that are higher than the human race. Sometimes we're referred to as the 9th rank or the 10th rank or the 10th spiritual hierarchy in, for example, the Rosicrucian tradition. And so there's 9 ranks above us. The idea is that a group of beings will be created. They're going to go through a complete evolutionary process. It's like a circle or a cycle. Once they complete that first cycle of evolutionary development, they'll move up to the next higher octave. And so when we talk about the angels, the original understanding of that is that this is the group of spiritual beings that went through something somewhat analogous to a human stage in a previous round of evolution, and they are now one level above us, non-physical and having particular faculties of consciousness and energy that are one evolutionary cycle more advanced than us. Above that, we have the archangels, including Archangel Michael, which are 2 evolutionary cycles more developed than us. Then above that, we have the Archai and the Elohim and the Dynamis and the Kyriates. There's whole ranks above us that have to do with what some traditions would call the great ancient ones. So in a classical training in spiritual initiation, there would be not only an intellectual understanding of these different ranks of spiritual beings, there would also be exercises to develop direct perception and, in time, communication with intelligences and beings of this higher level. So if we go to the archangelic level, these beings manifest in a variety of ways, and one thing that they're connected to are the spiritual aspect of what we see as the 7 planets in the solar system. Now, what's been almost forgotten today is that in classical initiation, connected first to the Egyptian tradition in what we have historical records for, and then going into the Jewish Kabbalah and the Greek Kabbalah, there was an understanding of something that in the Jewish Kabbalah was called the 7 heavenly halls, and that in the Greek tradition was called the celestial spheres. Again, we don't want this to be just some abstract intellectual thing. It needs to be directly experiential for people, because this is actually what we pass through between a death and a rebirth. This is the cycle that we pass through. So just as the human physical body is a crystallization in a physical space of a greater beingness that contains all of the energy, emotional, mental, etc., higher functions invisibly with that physical anchor, so the planets of the solar system also have an energetic, emotional, mental, higher spiritual level to them beyond what we see crystallized physically.
So I'm just gonna drop in here, because part of what excites me the most is synthesizing my own direct experience with these great traditions. And so I've been, for those of you who are just tuning into this podcast for the first time, I've been on the psychonautic plant medicine path for 25 years and really gone deep in a lot of the different traditions there. And in these different experiences that I've had encounters with these non-physical entities, angelic and demonic, on both sides. But one of the interesting developments is I'm able to actually inquire as to what energy I'm encountering. And surprisingly, more often than I would have ever expected, because I haven't really been into astrology or anything like that, the being that gives me the name of a planet.
Okay.
So I'll encounter Mercury or I'll encounter Jupiter. And then I start thinking about the correlation between that and then the Greek gods. And I'm like, well, I don't know who made that up, if they got it right or if they didn't get it right. So, but I'm just trying to tap into the energy of the planets themselves as beings. And it's been particularly interesting to do that. And sometimes angelic beings will actually call their own angelic name, like Metatron has been a helpful ally for me. So where do the planets and these other angels, and then also star beings like the star nations, like the Pleiadians, etc., how do we synthesize that with this kind of angelic map? Because I think that we're kind of referring to the same thing when we're talking about planets, angelic beings, you know, the archangelic beings, star beings. We're all kind of pointing to the same thing with a different name, it feels like to me.
Yes. So again, if we have the basic idea that what we see physically is analogous to a physical body of a human being, and there's all these other invisible levels beyond it, same thing is true for any celestial reference that we see. And this was always understood in the ancient world. One of the classical Rosicrucian ideas is that today, most people have lost their original clairvoyant faculty to perceive non-physical realities. We traded that for the ability to have an increased form of mental, intellectual functioning through the human brain. Still, we have peoples of the earth that maintain what the Rosicrucians call a blood clairvoyance, like tribal groups and native groups that still maintain some of the original clairvoyance. And we also have the pathway of people that lost it over time to develop the new intellectual faculties, but that this can be taken further into a new form of clairvoyance. But the basic idea is that whether we're talking about what we see as the visible stars or as the planets, there's going to be consciousness behind these celestial forces and all types of beings that are associated with it. So there could be beings that, if we use the mapping that's present in the Western tradition of the angels, archangels, archai, Elohim, etc., that there will be different beings of these ranks associated with them, and then particular types of beings and intelligences that may even be beyond that mapping that are related to the more distant stars and things of that kind. But conscious spiritual beings of a particular stage of evolution that have particular functions or powers. And often the names that would be given to these types of beings in classical traditions relate to what the power of the being is. So if we look at the name...
Like archetypal in a way.
Yes. But in many ways, a direct crystallization of what is the power or the function given by the One, by the unified source of all being, to that particular group, what they're supposed to do in the world. So Raphael means essentially God heals and is connected to the power of Mercury. And then Michael means who is as God. Now this indicates that Michael is, in a sense, the most advanced of all the archangelic beings, but it's also something that a person experiences if they directly experience in inner spiritual activities, an encounter with Archangel Michael. We have this kind of resounding force that interacts with us and leaves us with this question, who is as God? Now, what that reflects to us is the parts of ourselves that are still not divine, that still have a lot of development left to do. And Michael is the, again, archangelic being that's gone the furthest on the path of development. And just as the greatest of the planets, let's say, of our local system is the sun is the source of all light and heat and life and light in our world, that Archangel Michael is considered to be the archangel of the sun. So that is the sphere from which Archangel Michael operates.
So when people, I mean, there were so many different cultures that worship the sun as God. Ra
yes, absolutely.
was the sun. And so this makes a lot of sense. It is the source of light. We are actually condensed light.
Yes, absolutely.
And a part of this light that has been emanating from the sun. So this makes sense to identify God as the sun. Of course, there's a greater God that incorporates all suns and all stars and all all things and all forces. But it makes sense from the ancient perspective to say, okay, who's God? Well, it's the sun. Like it loves and shines constantly and ever presently without the judgment. It doesn't shine on this animal and not the other animal. Like, oh, you're not quite worthy. No sun for you. No sun for you, dog. Oh, cat, I like you very much. I'll shine for you. There's this kind of there's a lot of correlation, I think, between that sun energy and what you're saying is actually Archangel Michael is related to the sun. It's very much like the sun. Would that be fair to say?
That's absolutely right. So the classical understanding in the Western tradition is that there's a particular leading archangel. There'll be many, many other archangels, but these are like the leading ones that are connected to each planetary sphere. So like Raphael for Mercury, or particularly Archangel Michael for the sun itself. And so just as the sun is the most powerful and elevated of all of our local solar system celestial forces, so Archangel Michael is the most advanced of the archangels. So this is related then, if we look at this as a sacred geometry of space, where all of the celestial bodies of the planets and the sun and the moon are in our local system, arranged in a particular geometric array and cycling around each other in our solar system, that's a sacred geometry of space. And beyond that, we have a sacred geometry of time. Now, this means that if we have 7 primary planets that were understood in the ancient world, which are those that can be perceived with the naked eye of a human being without using other types of instruments, that there would be 7 leading spirits or archangels of each of these planetary forces. And this is all connected to the cosmic clock. Now, we live in a modern age, again, that's highly intellectual and fairly abstracted from natural phenomena. But if we lived a natural life and everything was connected to what we perceived in nature, including the sun and moon and the star positions as it was in the ancient world, then we would understand that everything is on a celestial timing cycle. So this is connected then to understanding the archangelic ages in the Western system, and this takes us to understanding, this is the age of Archangel Michael, that we have the precession of the equinox, that ancient peoples would understand if they went out at the time of the vernal equinox, the time that the light and dark part of the day is equal, as part of the yearly timing cycle, and they were to look at the sun's apparent position. The sun's position against the background of the 12 signs of the zodiac would move slightly backward every year. So to go 1 degree backward against the 360 degrees of the zodiac, as we would see it in the sky around us, would take 72 years. The 72 years it takes the visible position of the sun to move backward in the zodiac with the precession of the equinox is an archetype for the lifetime of a human being. We get, when we incarnate, let's say roughly 72 years for that experiential cycle, that alchemical cycle of that one lifetime, before we go back to be reprocessed, go through the 7 heavenly halls, which is the classical understanding of the spiritual aspect of the 7 planetary spheres that will then travel through in an out-of-body state, because our physical body is left behind between death and rebirth. And so that's 72 years of one human life. If we then see the time it takes to go 30 degrees or through one of the 12 signs of the zodiac in full, just as we say that we've been in the age of Pisces, and before that we had the age of Aries and things like that, because we're moving backward, the next age will be the age of Aquarius. And that takes 2,160 years to move through 30 degrees of the zodiac, the sun's apparent position at vernal equinox. And so if you take that 2,160 years and you divide it equally amongst the 7 planets and their leading archangels, then what you're going to end up with is a little over 300 years for each of the 7 archangels and planetary forces. Now, in the West today, we have some understanding from Western astrology about the planetary forces and how they manifest psychologically and energetically. But there's a lot of deep aspects that aren't found in Western astrology that are found in other systems, particularly perhaps the largest system that has unbroken observations for the most length of time, including written records, is that of the Vedic tradition of India, in what they call Jyotish, the science of light. Their understanding of the spiritual impact of the planetary spheres in a human life goes, in many ways, far beyond what we have in Western astrology, including entire timing cycle systems that don't exist in Western astrology. So, for example, if a person who is trained in Jyotish from India was to do a reading on a person's chart, they have something in India that's called the dasha system. And this is the timing cycle that's built into your lifetime when your karmas will ripen. That means all of the things in your karma that we carry inside of us, they're not active all the time, but there's a timing cycle that's hidden but can be determined using Jyotish methods for when these different karmas will ripen, whether they're things that we consider to be more pleasant or to be more malefic in our lifetime. And it can be very useful to know when those karmas are being ripened for us to deal with and to advance them.
Yeah, because all of these are just both either challenges or opportunities.
Yes.
And so being aware and conscious of these challenges or opportunities, then we can navigate ourselves with greater awareness and potentially greater ease to unlock the gift that's
Absolutely.
available by confronting this karmic.
Absolutely. So this would be the microcosmic aspect for one human being of their timing cycles, which everyone has, for when the karmas will ripen. On a larger perspective, going up to the more macrocosmic aspect of the planetary forces themselves, the things that on a much greater scale influence all human beings and everything that happens on the earth. This is going to be connected then to the archangelic regencies, when that particular planetary force with that archangelic being is the leading one that's going to set the tone for a particular age of roughly 300 years. So around the year 1879, according to the reckoning of the European Rosicrucians and the work of Rudolf Steiner, became the beginning of the latest age of Archangel Michael. So this has particular ramifications on the earth. The thing that's remarkable about this, and again, this is why we have to get beyond a simply metaphorical or abstract intellectual understanding of these things, and instead come into direct relationship with them with some form of clairvoyant perception of the actual beings and energies involved, and see how it actually manifests practically in the world. We can see tremendous change on the earth from the time that this latest Michaelic Age began in 1879. So one of the first things that happened at the beginning of the Michaelic Age is a direct manifestation of what is abstractly, intellectually referred to as Michael being the regent of the cosmic intelligence. So what it means when we say that Michael is the regent of the cosmic intelligence is that it's understood that in an ancient time on the earth, there was a primeval gnosis where all of the spiritual knowledge for how everything works in the non-physical worlds was together as one whole. But what happened in the evolution of humanity is that this primeval gnosis, all of this world knowledge, broke up into a variety of pieces. And in
was this like Atlantean times, and then the fall of Atlantis and the kind of diaspora that kind of came from there, where there's different traditions that kind of birthed in Mesoamerica and in Egypt and different places where they took fragments of this knowledge and then tried to maintain it.
Yes, and no doubt even pre-Atlantean. But again, at that point, very little historical record. And
so pre-Atlantean would be Lemurian potentially, and other different cycles that the records start to get very thin.
If you look at things like the secret doctrine of the Theosophist or some of the Rosicrucian work, it'd be the Lemurian and Hyperborean. And as we go further back, they're in times where the conditions on the earth are very different than we consider them to be today. But the idea is that the primeval gnosis, how everything fit together as a unified whole that we could understand, everything in spiritual reality that's invisible to us today and confuses us as we try just to find a way to live materially in a physical world, that broke up and different pieces of the puzzle went to different traditions around the world. Some amazing pieces went to the Himalayas, some went to China, some went to Central America. All over the world, different pieces came to fruition in these native traditions. Now, some things were shared with all traditions because they're so fundamental everybody needs to know them, but then there are certain keys given to different parts of the world. Archangel Michael, when we say he's the regent of the cosmic intelligence, if we dissolve that abstract intellectual idea into a direct perception of a living being and its reality, what we find is that Archangel Michael is a being that has the ability to understand how all the fragmented pieces fit together. And so for that reason, there's another name for Archangel Michael, which is that Michael is the cosmopolitan spirit. Cosmopolitan spirit basically meaning that this is a being that is at home in every tradition. So sometimes we think of, well, the traditions that talk about Archangel Michael are essentially the three Western monotheistic traditions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. But in fact, the being of Michael, potentially under other names and other symbology, exists in traditions all over the world. So, for example, you can find in the expressions of Manjushri in the Tibetan tradition things that are clearly a description of the Michaelic being, but with slightly adjusted symbology. So this then leads to the whole thing about when we understand Archangel Michael, the imagery that we have of Archangel Michael as a young blonde man wearing armor and wings and these types of things is a type of clothing given on the astral by people in the West to try to get some densification of a non-physical reality and to access it. But of course, Archangel Michael is not actually a young blonde man in a suit of armor. This is a non-physical being of a very vast level. And so a being that may be represented that way in the Western tradition may be represented very differently in the East, may be represented as a being floating on a cloud that is connecting to a particular energy center above a person's head in a column of energy. When you look at a Nepalese Tonka painting, there are different types of imagery that's associated with the being. So we don't want to get too caught up with any type of anthropomorphization of non-physical realities and think that that's the way they actually are.
So one thing that, and again, this is just me looking at the images and trying to understand, again, as I mentioned, I don't have this kind of angelic understanding to a deeper level, and I haven't had a direct encounter with Archangel Michael, so I have no personal gnosis of this. This is also what's spurring my curiosity. The sword.
Yeah.
The sword implies to me the sword of discernment, that which discerns the good, the true, and the beautiful, value from anti-value, and this kind of clarity, and also this warrior element of that. But I haven't heard you talk about that particular aspect of Michael. So what is that actually a true representation of this kind of warrior element to this spirit as well, this kind of fierceness?
And absolutely. And that is connected to the solar power. One of the most powerful spiritual experiences I ever had many, many years ago was in consciousness going through the seven heavenly halls journey. Before I knew that that existed, at this time I hadn't found any references to it. It was just a direct experience of going through the seven heavenly halls, the spiritual aspect of the planetary spheres, and passing through the sphere of the sun. And the sphere of the sun had the greatest impact on me. That when you are passing through the sphere of the sun, it's hard to express it in terms of our normal physical life and how much we're actually weighed down by our physicality, the physical body, all of the conditions of physical life that are on us. If you're a pure being of energy and you're passing through a world of light and fire, which is the sun, then your being is light and fire. So in a sense, Archangel Michael's basic nature is that of light and fire. And so they always say that his sword is a flaming sword. Now, again, we don't want to get caught up with that intellectually. It has to get, we would use a Rosicrucian term, we dissolve that outer intellectual idea into a direct, visceral, spiritual experience of connecting to that being and what that power is. So when we connect to the influence of Archangel Michael, which is the power of the sun itself, we have an unbelievable awakening and activation of energy and spiritual potential inside of us, where there's nothing weighing us down. None of the limitations of the physical body, none of the limitations of our different karmic neuroses or things of that kind. We become a being of pure light and fire, and we're filled with a type of spiritual enthusiasm and a feeling of all the potential for all the things that we could do, both in our own evolution and in service to others. And so this is then connected to what we have with the imagery of Michael's sword, this flaming sword. So on the one side, this is something that allows us to take action in the world. And if we see something that is unjust, something of darkness, then the flaming sword is what's going to cut through it and is going to illuminate it. It'll be linked to powers of discernment. So Michael and the powers of the sun are connected to the ability of the human mind to be expanded into a state where we can directly perceive non-physical realities and the true essential nature of a person, a place, a thing, any situation, and what its core nature actually is. It's a type of mental sword at one level to cut through things and see what is actually right in front of us. Now, it's because this is a higher metaphysical reality, when we try to understand it through our, again, more intellectual, brain-bound thinking, we usually have to do it by walking a circle around it and see it from multiple perspectives, because there are multiple valid perspectives on what it is. So one aspect of it is, yes, that warrior aspect, when you're filled with the light and power of the sun itself, then you will have no limitations in striding forth in the world and moving against things that are corrupted or evil or of harm or things of that kind. So that's a warrior aspect. But again, there's also that sort of mental discernment. Now, this is also understood in other traditions as the power of the sword. So I'll give a very short version of this one Japanese story that I learned when I lived in Japan, and it always had a lot of meaning for me. So there was a time in Japanese history where two warlords are going to have a massive battle that will determine who becomes the shogun, the supreme ruler of all of Japan. And one of the two warlords has a much inferior army, fewer men, less equipment, doesn't have the advantages of the other army. And so he has a type of existential terror that he's gripped with about to enter into this battle, which could lead to total destruction. So he goes to have an audience with a Zen priest, and he asks the Zen priest, when you are caught in the duality between life and death, what do you do? And the Zen priest replies, you strip away the duality and leave the one sword straight against the sky. And what that basically means is you get out of the duality with the fear about, I'll be successful, I'll have failure. It'll go well, it'll go terribly. I'll have tremendous pleasure, I'll have tremendous pain. You cut away all that duality, and all you have left is the one sword straight against the sky, which is the pure reality of there's only one right action to take. And you'll do that one right action without any hesitation, regardless of what the consequence is. You don't worry about that. That is the hallmark of someone who's a real spiritual initiate, of someone that has really developed themselves to a high level. They get to the point where they see that one sword against the sky. There's one right thing to say. There's one right action to take. And regardless of what it costs me, I'm going to stand in integrity and I'm going to do that. That's easier to do when we're filled with the power and the light and the fire of the sun.
It seems like Yeshua had a lot of Michaelic energy in doing what he did on this plane, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even said at some point, I come bearing a sword.
Yeah.
And the turn the other cheek guy, you know, also says, I come bearing a sword. It seems like there was a lot of Michaelic influence in how Yeshua actually approached things, because he was going to speak his truth about the way, the truth, the life, and no matter the cost, and no matter when he could have run away and saved his own life, there was one sword against the sky, which is actually interestingly like the cross could be a sword if you flipped it upside down and it becomes a sword in the sword shape. And it's just like, no, this is the way, and I accept my fate, amor fati, like this is the way it must go.
Yes, there's a fascinating aspect of the Rosicrucian tradition where they talk about, in addition to the planetary forces that are outside of us, that we see in the solar system and their spiritual aspects and their spiritual beings, there's also particular planetary influences on larger parts of human evolution over great spans of time. And so one of the things that they talk about is that the first half of Earth evolution, us living and developing on the Earth, the first half of it is connected to the Mars impulse. The second half of it is connected to the Mercury impulse. So the Mars impulse was the time when a knight, like a Knight, knight, became a knight of the sword, and would actually go out and fight to protect their people and to establish something in the world. That was in the time of Mars, which is a time of evolution through conflict. At the time of the incarnation of the Christ being, from the Rosicrucian perspective, was the turning point of time, where we moved toward the healing of the Mercury period. And one of the manifestations of Mercury is that of Buddhism, the Buddha, of Bodhi, and even some of the terms in Sanskrit related to Mercury are directly related to Buddha and Buddhism as a type of healing impulse. And so this movement into the new Mercury impulse then led to the transformation of the Knight of the Sword becoming a Knight of the Word. And that Knight of the Word became a fundamental concept of the Holy Grail tradition after the time of the incarnation of Christ. And as we move into the European epoch after that, that the Knight of the Word is one who finds the speech that will illuminate and heal through the words that they find. And that is an imitation of Christ and with the teachings of Jesus, etc. So we need to go back and understand then that this solar power, when you say, well, Jesus seemed to really be connected to this force of Michael, absolutely. But from the greater perspective of the Rosicrucian tradition, Michael is an emanation of the greater macrocosmic being of the sun, which in the old Persian Zoroastrian system, long before Christianity, was referred to as Ahura Mazdao, which means the spiritual being seen in the aura of the sun. And Ahura Mazdao was then understood in later Western times as the Christos. Christos being the solar logos, the spiritual being seen in the aura of the sun. And so this then led to an understanding of particular types of spiritual initiation with the forces of the sun and the moon as the archetypal yang and yin forces coming into the human being, not just as an intellectual abstraction, but as an actual process. And so in the early Christian centuries, if you go back and read the original documents of Christianity, which are so different than what we have as an explanation of Christianity today, one of the great early initiates of Christianity was a fellow named Origen, who lived in Alexandria, Egypt, around the 3rd century AD. And he wrote an amazing book called On First Principles, where he's trying to describe who and what is the Christ being. And in the early Christian understanding, Jesus and the Christos are two separate things. Jesus is a human initiate that is going to form the archetype of a new form of initiation, to be able to activate that central column of energy, which you can clearly see in Eastern representations, such as in Nepalese Tonka paintings, that vertical column of energy that goes down through the center of the human being down into the earth and rises up above. And in the Nepalese illustrations, you can see the sacred geometry of the centers above the head that connect us to higher spiritual realities. And then in the Christian iconography, what you see is at the time that Jesus is being baptized in the Jordan by John, is they'll show a line of light coming straight down from above in the same central column, and the dove of the Holy Spirit descending into the crown of Jesus. The original understanding is that the solar logos, the Christos, the Christ being, was moving into the sheaths as a type of solar yoga, at a type of solar initiation for this very advanced initiate, Jesus.
Would the halo be like kind of like a portal of the sun that is actually helping bring that energy through, the golden light halo that you see around these angelic beings?
Absolutely. That is showing you the periphery of the actual column of energy that's descending around the head as it gets illuminated with gold.
Yeah.
And so this then was described by Origen in his book On First Principles, again in the early Christian centuries in Alexandria, Egypt, where he says, how do we understand what the Christ being even is? And again, this was a time that people understood that this was the solar logos. This was the being of the sun, S-U-N, sun. There's a fantastic book if people want to get more background to the original understanding of this, a book that's called Jesus Christ, Son, S-U-N of God. And it's very easy to read. It's in short sections. It's got all types of pictures from earlier times showing the solar connection to the Christ being. But anyway, Origen is saying in the book that if we think about what the Godhead actually is, people say things like, oh, I talk to God. But God is everything everywhere, everything in the known and seen world and everything in the unknown worlds and multiverses. It is the totality of the oneness of everything. It's a being so vast we cannot see its edges. It's hard to get a sense of what this thing actually is. So he talks about the way, and this is then shown in sacred geometry, in classical, Masonic, or Rosicrucian texts, that first level of beingness is what's called the Godhead. And that is represented as a point in the center of a circle. Same as the image for Ra'ah, the netter of the sun in ancient Egypt, which later became the point in the center of the circle, became the image for gold, which is the physical crystallization of the power of the sun into a physical element later on. So that first level of the Godhead, so vast we can't fully comprehend it, gets reduced in scale to the macrocosmic level, just like the early Hermetic teachings, as above, so below, as within, so without, and that we are the microcosm of the macrocosm. So that Godhead nature, all the qualities of the Godhead are then reduced in scale to the level of the macrocosm, which manifest within the physical sacred geometry of our solar system as the sun, an incredible, massive sphere of light and warmth that gives life to everything. And then the being of that is the Christos. And the Christos is reduced in scale to the level that we can perceive and interact with this being. And that is the being literally of the sun being a portal to a much vaster divine world beyond it. And that through this type of solar initiation, which occurred in many different traditions, a solar initiation, you're bringing that force into the person and giving yourself that same level of activation that you would have passing through the sun sphere between death and rebirth, administered by Archangel Michael, but based on the power of the Christos, of Ahura Mazda, the being of the sun, the solar logos. Mm-hmm. And so then the human being is the next level of fractal emanation downwards, so that we at the microcosmic level, like the Hermetic teaching, we're the microcosm of the macrocosm, we have all the qualities of the Godhead, which is why the classical texts say that we are the crown of creation. We have all this incredible potential. Most people don't use 1/1000th of 1% of their divine potential, but we can be activated into it and to actually connecting with that. And so the human being has all the qualities of the Godhead, which is the same as all the qualities of the Christos, in our microcosmic level, if we choose to connect to it and to activate it. One aspect of how microcosmically in our immediate physiological and energetic system that the sun manifests in the human being is shown in classical texts as the sun manifesting at the heart. Mm-hmm. And so the heart itself is related to the power of the sun when we fully connect to it.
The monad, the Atman,
yeah,
exactly. this connection to the aspect of God that is the light.
Yes, absolutely.
And so as we're in this experience of polarity, there's the other side. And so for me, in understanding this, I've, really felt into, okay, what is the opposite of the sun? The opposite of the sun is a black hole. It's that which, instead of emanating light, it actually absorbs light and then brings it back in. And I call that the void. Like there's the void energy that pulls that in. And so there's this, and I just recently had a podcast. It's actually going to be released the week before ours here with Nassim Haramein, who actually says that there's a black hole at the center of the sun and has some equations to figure that out, like the cosmic battery of this yin yang of the emanation and the drawing in that creates the energy of the one.
Yes.
Split into polarity of the light and that force which sucks the light.
Yes.
And then the beings that are associated with, and correlated to those different emanations. So we have the angelic beings associated with the light, and then we have the darker beings. So if you go to the Zoroastrian tradition, that would be Angramenyu, which was another name for Ahriman.
Exactly.
Right? Which is like in my mind, makes the most sense. Is like, okay, this is a being of the void. This is the being of the drawing in and the dissolution of all creation and articulation. It's actually returning things back to the one source.
Yes. So we always have the challenge of using our intellect to create a scaffolding around highly dynamic, non-physical realities and these things that are going on. So one aspect of it is that absolutely there is the polarity between what we see of the sun as a massive source of light and heat, and then of the black hole, which sucks everything into a dark center. Now, this can be understood as part of a cosmological process, that there are worlds far beyond our visible three-dimensional world. And when things come from the divine into our local solar system, they come through the sun, and that manifests with that power as the light and the fire. If instead what we're doing is we're taking things from this created three-dimensional world that we're in and taking it to another world, then it's going to be going into that black hole. It's going to go from here and it's going to go somewhere else at another part of the macrocosm and the multiverse that we're surrounded by. Then we have the aspect of the counter forces to more benevolent evolutionary forces, which would be de-evolutionary forces moving backwards in evolution rather than forward.
Anti-life, anti-logos, anti-value, anti-Christos.
Absolutely.
The opposite.
And with that, we can start to also understand some of the polarity connected to the beings around the Christos. So, for example, one of the most powerful sacred geometry patterns we can manifest in the human energy body is a form of initiation that will structure our energy system and our consciousness, can be taken through the gate of death, and will help us in further incarnations, is what is primarily known today to people as the Tree of Life from the Jewish Kabbalistic tradition, but it existed in Egypt before that, and it has other variations. But the basic idea of that is that there are three pillars in the human energy system. There's a central pillar that runs from the crown to the perineum in the exact center of the body.
Yep.
And then there's a right pillar and a left pillar.
The Keter to the Malchut.
Yes.
Yep. On the central channel. Yeah.
And that's as it manifests literally within the human energy body as a sacred geometry of our energy field. So activating it can be very powerful. So in that central channel of the human energy field, this is considered a secret teaching in many traditions, particularly Western traditions, but it's spoken of more directly in some Eastern traditions. And particularly in Eastern traditions, like I say, the Nepalese tradition, they'll show it very clearly. But then you have the left and the right hand pillars. And so these don't go all the way up to Keter, all the way up to the divine. They don't go all the way down to Malkuth, all the way down into the full crystallized. But they are two opposite polarity forces, so it's the yin and the yang. It could be seen as the solar, lunar, things of that kind, and that's why the Ida and Pingala of the Himalayan tradition are understood as these two side energies that come, sometimes ascending straight upward, sometimes caduceus through the energy body. But this then manifests at the larger scale of spiritual beings, just as we have the Christos holding the perfect balance between the higher divine world and the crystallized physical world, so that our spiritual nature can fully manifest in a physical body and in physical reality. We have two other types of beings to either side. And so since you mentioned Angramenyu or Ahriman from the old Persian Zoroastrian teachings, this is the time, I think, to mention again in this conversation about in the classical Rosicrucian understanding that that middle pillar, the perfect balance between heaven and earth, is held by the crystals, which then at a lower level of manifestation becomes the being and the force of Archangel Michael and other types of beneficial beings, the Buddha, etc. Then to the two sides, you have the possible polarity between spirit and matter of beings that are totally connected to spirit and want nothing to do with matter, which are connected to great amounts of light. And so they were known as light bearer or Lucifer in the ancient tradition. And so the Luciferic beings are the beings that are great beings of light, but it's a light that can blind rather than illuminate. It's an unbalanced light. And so these are the beings that encourage us to ignore the opportunities of physical incarnation. They say the physical world is an illusion, it's a maya, it doesn't exist. Don't worry about any of that. Get off the cycle of karma and reincarnation. You don't need to be here and just go back to the spiritual world. Not understanding or not representing that it's through our alchemical, cyclical process in the physical world that we'll develop to the point that we can be fully active in the spiritual world in a way we cannot now because we haven't developed all of our latent spiritual powers yet. Our siddhas are not yet fully activated. If we were to leave this particular crucible of physical incarnation too early, it would be like breaking a caterpillar out of a cocoon before it became a butterfly. It would just be a gooey mass of caterpillar, and it would never become the butterfly. So the Luciferic beings are beings of great spiritual light and power and knowledge, but they don't give us a true reflection of the importance of physical incarnation and what that whole process is about. The other side of it is those beings that were actually used by higher spiritual forces and beings to create the crystallization process of the thought forms in the mind of God into actual physical matter and physical structures, including all the physical matter of the physical plane and to create human bodies and everything that's physicalized and concretized here. And those are the beings being referred to in the Persian Zoroastrian tradition as Angramenu or Ahriman, and then became known in the Egyptian tradition as Set. And then when Moses led the Hebrews out of Egypt, then in the transformation of the Egyptian temple science teachings that he learned in Egypt into what became the Jewish Kabbalah, Set became Ha-Satan, meaning the adversary in Hebrew, and became our idea of Satan. So the satanic forces, the Ahrimanic forces, are those that were necessary here to be able to create physical crystallization, a physical world, human physical bodies, but they are in love with matter, and their one-sided spiritual influence on human beings is to tell us that only physical materiality is real, that everything that's metaphysical, beyond the physical, is an illusion. They've completely conquered modern science and medicine to say that there's nothing real beyond physical matter and physical structure. And they try to get us to believe that everything of a innate moral nature, everything of a spiritual nature is just an illusion. There is nothing but
everything is a story. It's all a fiction. There is no value. There is no logos. There is no Christos. It's all about what can you measure, and then it turns into a power game. Win-lose metrics depending on who's the most powerful dominant force. This is the emperor of the empire of whatever that is, whether it's Sauron in Lord of the Rings or whether it's the emperor in Star Wars. We have these mythological stories that are trying to understand what this Ahrimanic force is, which is reducing what could be seen as the love, as the currency of the cosmos into power, that which can be measured. How much force can you actually apply based on the matter and the equations of force and matter, right?
Yes, it's based on the whole idea that since there is nothing else beyond the physical and everything physical is just because of random biochemical interactions that have no meaning or purpose or destiny, that the only thing that makes sense to do here is to have a will to power and to try to dominate and control everything and everyone as much as possible. And if people will allow you to do it, then they deserve to be dominated. And it's the law of the jungle. Yeah. And, just let whatever is the alpha predator control everything. That's the logic on that particular side. And we can't get rid of the Ahrimanic beings on one side or the Luciferic on the other side. They have to be here for particular purposes. One is pulling us down, one is pulling us up, but neither one is a balanced force. There always has to be a balance in the middle, like the Tibetans talk about the middle path or the middle way between polarities is always the way to go in life. And so that's the Christos, that's the central column that holds the balance between them. And again, it gets reflected in an actual sacred geometric pattern in the human energy field, but it also becomes the archetype of how we navigate our way forward in life. It's interesting to see that in ancient Egypt, when they showed Set, they showed a Egyptian pharaoh or ruler being empowered by both Set on one side and a more benevolent being like Horus on the other side. That we needed to be empowered with the knowledge and abilities that the Ahrimanic satanic beings have, because they created and they know all the things that work on the physical plane. All the power over the physical plane is held there. Whereas the Luciferic beings on the other side have a lot of knowledge about the spiritual world, but they present it in a twisted way that we don't see how it connects to our being right here, right now, and what we need to do in physical incarnation.
So the Michaelic Christic path is to synthesize the opposites and find our own central column. And, interestingly, at the center of the Sphirot, the tree of life, is Tiferet. And Tiferet, one of the translations of that is beauty.
Yes, exactly.
And this was a teaching I was just recently with Rebbe Gaffney, and we were going into it and really understanding that, when we look out at value, if we find that thing that is of value, it's beautiful.
Yes, absolutely.
It's like beauty is actually the good, the true, the beautiful, but beauty is important. Like, is it beautiful? Is your life beautiful? Is this experience beautiful? Like when you can step into beauty and then the awe of beauty that comes, then you're in really right relation with the cosmos. When you see, behold, I make all things new. Behold, I make all things beautiful.
Yes.
Is another way to interpret that Christic teaching.
And to actually feel the magnetic pull of the thing that is beautiful, that pulls us to want to unite with it. That's the same thing that we have in our human relationships, that we want to unite with what we see that's beautiful. We want to become one with it. Mm-hmm. And that the great subconscious impulse that we all carry in our wanting to connect to other people and to have a union with another human being is to get out of our separate beingness and to connect back to our primordial state of being part of the one, where we're not separate from the unity, the oneness of all creation. And so that becomes the tantric basis of our having such a perfect connection sexually, tantrically with another person that we can't feel where we end and they begin. Mm-hmm. And then something tremendously powerful at an alchemical spiritual level happens, that the two become one. And whenever two opposite polarities merge into one, it opens up the center. It opens up a gate to the divine. And then these divine energies can flood in when the two have become one. And you have the same type of teaching in Christianity, that where two or more gather in my name, I'm there with you. Certain things are necessary that come from the unification back into one. We all came from the one. We came into a world of separation, and we all subconsciously yearn to be reconnected to the one. The goal, as I understand it, and as stated in many classical traditions, is to develop the state where we can at will unify back with others into the one, but then at will separate out with freedom into being independent and having independent action. Mm-hmm. The challenge that we all have between love and freedom in our interpersonal relationships is, where do we find that perfect balance in the dynamic interactions of us with our significant other, where we have that we desire in the relationship of the oneness, but also each person getting the amount of independence and freedom that they need, not to feel smothered or suppressed by the relationship. It's constant dynamic dance.
Yeah, that the desire for zivug or union mixed with the desire for autonomy and our independent agency and sovereignty in our own life. It's a pull, and if you get the right thing, it feels like a dance. It's just like just the right amount of pressure on the hand. If you're doing a tango or a salsa, you know, so you move in a certain way that has a certain amount of pressure, but together the dance is unified. You're in the same intimacy. You're in the same erotic union, but also maintaining that kind of tension between it.
I love telling the story that I heard from the French medical doctor Samuel Sagan, who created the Clairvision School, which was in Australia at the time that I trained with it in the 1990s. And he had a lot of great concepts and terminology. And he described the way that in certain states of higher consciousness, higher meditation, that you may perceive that there is a great spiritual being that you are connecting with. And you think it's one being. And then you start to perceive that from this great sphere of light and energy that is this great spiritual being, other smaller beings of light and energy begin to separate out from it. And you realize this is a composite being, that these other beings can actually do something that he called combinescence. And they can have combinescence together and unify into this one greater being. But then they can separate at will and become an independent being again. It's somewhat similar to what you see in some of what today we tend to consider UFO phenomena, in which you'll see out of nowhere a great light appears, and then out of that great light, multiple lights will peel out and spin all around, and they'll come back to the central light, then it'll disappear, things of this kind. So this is a kind of manifestation that higher angelic ranks have attained that ability to unify together, have a big party, and all become one again in a unified form, but at will they can separate out and become independent and do their own activity again.
So I'll share a story from my own direct experience. I was in a darkness retreat, so 6 days in isolation in absolute black. So a darkness retreat is not a little bit dark. It's not like solitary confinement where you have a little window and things are mostly dark. It's absolute black.
Yes.
And after 3 days, and this doesn't happen for everybody, but there's often an endogenous DMT release that's triggered from this experience. So I started having visions. And then I started having visions of these little like spaceships that were in my, and I'm in a room, but it's completely dark. And so all above me are glowing lights and spaceships. And finally, after 2 days of looking at these spaceships, I say, okay, is there something you want to tell me? Is there a message here for me? I got real curious about this. And then immediately I start to make contact with this star nation. And this star nation identified itself as the Pleiadians. And they spoke to me in a singular voice. And it was a singular voice. It was like, we are Pleiadian, you know, like, but it was one voice that seemed to represent all of multitude of beings, this combinessence as you're talking about.
Yes.
And then they said, they gave me a name in that, and I said, I don't think I like that name. And as soon as I said, I don't think I like that name, the combinessence, the singularity of voice, it broke and fractaled into a million different individual beings laughing. It was like at the point of laughter, they all separated and had their own laugh. You know, like that was the thing where it's like all of a sudden this singular being that was delivering a singular message started laughing hysterically at this idea that me in my human form would be challenging the fact that this sacred name that I was blessed with, that I didn't like it. And they found that absolutely hilarious. And so all the beings broke into separation and was just howling in laughter. And then I started laughing. And then they, you know, returned back to their, you know, combinatory form. But it's interesting that I had an experience that really anchored and represented what you're talking about here.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You know, this really does go to like the core of the patterns that we study in sacred geometry, which is really the divine blueprint of all the patterns that create things, that movement between the unity and then the separation into individuality, polarity, etc., and this almost constant pulsation moving between the two over greater spans of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if we connect this back up to the original idea of what are we doing living in the age of Archangel Michael
Yeah, and
today?
what ought we do?
Yes. So it's always a matter of, take advantage of the prevailing winds. If we have a sailboat, you would use the prevailing winds to pull us faster in the direction we need to go. And so if this is the current age of Archangel Michael, in a sense, this is the highest of the archangelic ages. It's the sun period. And so if we take a look at what are these aspects of Archangel Michael that we are partaking in now, this ability to bring together the knowledge of multiple traditions into a unified gnosis again is something huge. I've often mentioned in interviews that my perspective on the current state of metaphysics is a blessing and a curse. The blessing is that we have unbelievable access to previously hidden information from traditions all over the world that kept this information very secret previously. Things like the internal alchemy formulas for self-transformation coming from the Taoist tradition in China. Before the 1980s, good luck trying to find any information on any of that. But starting in the 1980s, this information began to be published. Things that I know would cost you $10,000 in gold if you can find the person who would share it with you in Los Angeles in the early 1980s, you can now get for $19.95 in a book that describes to you that particular alchemical process.
Sure.
It's absolutely unbelievable. So the release of previously hidden information from all these different traditions. In previous incarnations, we'd had to go to incredible lengths to try to travel to places and try to get entry into temples and try to learn some of these things. Now there's so much available to us. So that's the great blessing. It's unbelievable what we have access to. The curse is that it's in a fragmented form that doesn't necessarily come into a coherent whole until we apply the energy to it to reunite those fragments back together. And some of the information may be, just like computer data, may be corrupted in a way that we need to put it back into a form that makes sense. Or there may be a certain knuckleball in the teaching that goes with somebody's esoteric agenda, which may not be something completely benevolent. And so there's a lot of discernment connected. Now, lots of times people get kind of burned out and frustrated with this and say, why is this so difficult? Why does this require so much effort? Why can't I just have the pure, unvarnished truth of how everything fits together presented to me? And I think we need to see it within the context that this is a initiation trial. One of the classic ideas is that as we develop further in our earthly journey, we will be given initiation trials where we have to overcome certain challenges, and through doing so, we'll develop new strengths that we have to develop, and we could not develop without overcoming those challenges. So with that sword of discernment from Archangel Michael, we now live in a time where we are flooded with information, including absolutely incredible, very advanced information, but it's within a morass of things of lower quality and that may not be true, may not be useful. And so it requires a very active flaming sword of discernment to find what is the true and the valuable and the beautiful, and to put it into a coherent whole in a way that allows us to fully consciously reclaim our own personal answer to what I often think of as the three key questions of human life. Who am I? Why am I here? And what did I incarnate to do in this particular lifetime?
Mm-hmm.
Because what I have seen from my perspective is that so many people are so lost and wounded by the difficulties of human existence today, trying to make sense of the world they live in and their traumas that have built up over time, that they are very far from accomplishing whatever their karmic purpose was, whatever karmic contract they had agreed to when they passed through the sphere of the sun before physical incarnation. At that time, you're not carrying your karma, your heavy bags, all the difficulties of physical life that you have to try to figure out. And being a being of pure light and fire, you said, yeah, when I get down to earth, I'm going to do all this incredible stuff. Then you get here and you take on all the heavy bags of your karma and the difficulties of physical existence. And you're up to your ass in alligators and forgot you came to drain the swamp. And that's very, very common today. So that taking advantage of this background power that is there today with Archangel Michael, the power of the sun, to reclaim our own personal answers to those three questions, remembering, who am I? Why am I here? What am I going to do in this lifetime? And putting it together, things will almost automatically work out fantastic on the planet if people wake up, empower themselves, and do what they came here to do, rather than getting lost in their own particular trauma trail. So this is something absolutely essential. This is something very real that is available to us right now here in the Age of Archangel Michael. Also connected to it, at the beginning of this recent 300-year period of Archangel Michael, which won't occur again for another part of the 2,160-year cycle. We're very fortunate to live at this moment. That it's connected to, in 1879, was the beginning of everything we have in the transformation of the Earth with modern technology. There was no mass communication in 1879. Nobody had a phone in their house. There was none of the modern communication technologies. There wasn't even electrification. Nobody had electricity in the house. It didn't exist. That didn't happen until the late 1800s, and really didn't happen until 1900 with applying Tesla's discoveries. So that was the beginning of the creation of modern communication technologies. It's another part of that Michaelic Age where people can communicate clearly with each other and over vast distances and share information, share inspiration, things that are going to help people on their path. Now, always there's a dark shadow to that, with things that are using communication technologies to try to divide and to
manipulate, coerce, control, dominate, all of the harmonic.
And with the things that we're seeing now with trying to suppress information, the amount of censorship, the loss of the idea of free speech has become something incredible in just a few years. So if we look at it, though, we have this new Michaelic Age with the communication involved as the regent of the cosmic intelligence that is making all this available to us. So we are now able to access information and to connect with people and impulses from all over the planet almost instantaneously. And this didn't exist when the beginning of the age started in 1879. So this is an incredible transformation that's directly linked to the Age of Archangel Michael. Now, again, we also have available to us in our own inner life, in our own inner work, that type of solar activation experience spoken of in many traditions with their solar yoga or solar initiation. That, because this is the Age of Archangel Michael, this ability to connect to a greater divine force in meditation and inner development work that is going to bring into us that solar power, becoming a being of light and fire, and bringing up that potential of our willpower to actually manifest ourselves more fully and to do the work in the world and to work with other people in service to create something that is absolutely amazing, is something very real and available to us right now. So these are some of the hallmarks of the Michaelic Age that we're living in.
Yeah, it's so beautiful and so resonant with what I feel many of us are doing. It's very much what you're doing. It's very much what I'm endeavoring to do, and praying for guidance and listening to how I can serve that cause in the very best way possible. I want to segue now into, we've been talking, very philosophically, but I want to get into some tangible elements where you have a great amount of expertise and mastery of. And one of the tie-ins that I saw when I was doing some research and diving in, and by the way, for anybody listening, you have an unbelievable array of courses and which are packed with different techniques, and you've really synthesized so much knowledge and offering that, again, those things that you would have to pay in $10,000 worth of gold, or bring and travel up a mountain somewhere to get. You now have at vesica.org. That's the URL,
that's correct,
right?
Vesica.org.
Vesica.org, and you have all of these courses. And one of the things that I was particularly allured to was the conversation about the universal vibrational spectrum and the working with light and the different shades and colors of light. Because there's the light, but then the light breaks down into all of the different color spectrums of that light.
Absolutely.
And in my house, because of the physiological benefits, I have a lot of red lights. So very strong red lights. And I use them in my both journey space, meditation space, and also for just the physical, improvements and benefits of actually bathing yourself in this red light energy. And I saw that it was connected to Archangel Michael as well, the being of light and fire, and the red light kind of coming through that way. So I wanted to talk about red light, not from the physiological perspective. If you want that, I wrote about it in my book, Own the Day, and there's tons of information about the physiological benefits of red light.
Yeah.
But what about the metaphysical benefits of red light? And then from red, I want to talk about, a few of the other colors that we could potentially work with to open up different faculties.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you. Again, for me, I can only understand things by going from the big picture and then down to the specific.
Perfect.
So let's talk about the universal vibrational spectrum and what I mean by that term. I have a particular online course called Universal Vibrational Spectrum that was inspired by the original work of French energy researchers in the early 1900s, which most people have no idea of today, unfortunately, and which also became a foundation for my friend Dr. Ibrahim Karim from Cairo, Egypt, to create the modern science of biogeometry. So the idea here is that there is a universal scale of energy, a universal spectrum of energy that contains all the possible energetic functions that could exist within yin and yang, within activation and sedation. Every specific energetic or biological function is somewhere in this energetic spectrum. So that's the universal vibrational spectrum, something that comes directly from the divine plane. That's all the specific siddhas or powers that create every possible manifestation in the created worlds. That universal spectrum can then manifest itself through quality scales. And so all of these different universal powers can manifest themselves through light or pigment in the scale of color. And so when we look at that color spectrum, every one of the colors in the spectrum has a different siddha or power that it can apply. But it could also manifest itself in the quality scale of sound. So you could use sound, and all the different tones or combinations of tones would have different powers and functions. Or it can be manifested through shape, and we can use geometry and the actual form of things to manifest this, like the idea of form follows function. The shape you give to thing actually will do something that Dr. Karim in biogeometry refers to as the forming process. And by using the forming process, you can manifest anything into it having the particular vibrational power that you're looking for. So color and sound and shape, but also through movement and angle and proportion and number, all of these are quality scales. Now, this is one of the fundamental aspects in the biogeometry work from Dr. Karim that he refers to under the title of the physics of quality. So the physics of quality is how you have this universal spectrum of energy which can manifest itself into these discrete, specific quality scales: color, shape, sound, motion, angle, proportion, number, etc. Now, this is why you can have some people who do all kinds of amazing healing work, and they use nothing but color. They're color therapists. Other people use nothing but sound, and they're sound therapists. The only reason that this could exist is because that spectrum they're using is allowing them to tap into the universal power, which means that a particular color will be equivalent to the vibrational impact of a particular sound.
So, and when we're talking about these sounds, there's do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and then it repeats at another octave to get to do.
Yeah.
Right? So these are like the primordial sounds of the word, the primordial sounds of the cosmos. And if you're chanting, these different sounds have different physiological effects on the body, and these notes,
absolutely,
impact us just as light, if you use that quality scale, will also have different impacts.
Absolutely. And this leads to what a lot of people are excited by and exploring today, because with our modern technology given to us by the new age of Michael, that we can have technologies where we can create any color light we want at any time in a way that wasn't easy before 1879. Any sound or sound combination that we like that wasn't easy before then, etc. That how do we bring together these different vibrational energies, either for healing work or for activation work at a spiritual level, or to create experiences for people where they go into spaces that are like a modern temple with the sound and the light and form and everything, creating these composite experiences.
I guess stained glass would have been the first early way to work with the solar light breaking into a pigment and then expressing. So the original red light would be a largely red stained glass window that could actually, put red light into a space.
Or to do things like use gemstones that have a particular color that are then ones that are as flawless as possible to allow as much light to go through them. And then they would cut them to give them a geometric shape in combination with the transparency to the light that will come out of it. So a ruby is giving you red light, and an amethyst is giving you violet light.
Oh, this is getting real exciting, because we're going to go from colors into gemstones next. Yes. So let's stick with colors now.
Yes.
And then we'll go into crystals and gemstones after
exactly.
that.
So that's kind of the big picture of the universal vibrational spectrum. So if we take a look at the color spectrum, when the French researchers and what they called physical radiesthesia, and radiesthesia basically meaning a sensitivity or an ability to detect subtle radiations. These French researchers in the early 1900s then worked with all these different vibrational qualities in the world, but they always used the names of colors to refer to them. So you may get the vibrational effect of a red or a blue or a green from a sound or a shape or something of that kind. But they use the names of colors because that's what we understand the most easily. We have a good visceral sense of that. If a person's not colorblind, we all know what those colors are.
I wonder, that just is a total tangent, but I wonder if people who are colorblind have a different metaphysical reality that they're navigating because they're unable to perceive that color. But I suppose their photoreceptors are also receiving it in a non-mental way.
So they have done research where they have found in color therapy that even if a person is colorblind and they're not receiving it through the eye, that the other receptors in the body for things like red light therapy, it still works.
That makes sense.
For them, So if we think about then the impacts of the different colors, in addition to ancient forms of color therapy, as we move into the modern age of Michael, there have been some incredible bodies of work in color therapy where they have identified the vibrational effects of color for all types of different systems, at the physical level, at the emotional level, at the mental level, even at spiritual levels. So the system developed called spectrochrome by a fellow named Dinshaw back in like the 1920s was an incredible system, actually used in hospitals and by medical doctors for a while before, as always, the AMA destroyed it. But they did incredible things. People would have third-degree burns all over their body, and they would know the combination of particular turquoise light and other types of light to use on the body to regenerate the skin. Nothing that can be done today with modern hospital methods. And there were actually trials at the time in the 30s where people that worked at the hospital said, no, this is fantastic. Why are you trying to destroy this? We saved all these people using these color therapies. Almost forgotten today. But what you find very strong in this work coming from Dinshaw with his spectrochrome system is that it had tremendous observations about what the colors of light did physiologically in the body. And so he was able to specify how a particular type of light used on the body would affect a specific organ or gland or physiological function. Then there was a body of work that was developed in modern-day pranic healing, developed by Master Choa Kok Sui from the Philippines, which is now a massive international healing system. And so because it's pranic healing, it's working then not so much at the physical level, it's working at the energy level, chi, ki, prana, ether. And so in pranic healing, there's tremendous observations for what the energetic impacts are at the life force level of the different colors of light, which then have physiological functions and biological impacts. And then you have the work coming from Dr. Peter Mandel in Germany. And Peter Mandel developed a system called color puncture. He was working at one time with a scientist named Fritz Popp. And Fritz Popp, quite a few decades ago, discovered that human cells emit light. And he referred to this as biophotons, that the human information transfer system biologically in the body is not purely chemical. It's actually based on light and transfers of light signals inside the body, which he was able to prove. And so after he developed this as a modern scientific discovery, the existence of biophotons and the triggering of biological functions through biophotons, then his associate, Dr. Peter Mandel from Germany, developed color puncture because they found that they could transmit colored light through the acupuncture meridians of the body, and they could turn the scientific discovery into a healing system. Interestingly, Mandel's work tends to focus more on the psychological, the emotional and mental aspects of the impact of the light. And then you have, with the work coming from the French radiesthesist, these applications of the vibrations from the light or from forms, that they did amazing work. They rediscovered secrets from the Egyptian temple science and China and India and Easter Island related to many of their techniques and rituals and even the forms that they used that are related to these vibrations. So long story short, I created an online class called the Universal Vibrational Spectrum, where I brought together the observations of the effect of the color from the more physical perspective from spectrochrome and Dinshaw from the energetic etheric level coming in the pranic healing system from the Philippines, and at the emotional, mental, psychological level with the work of Peter Mandel from Germany, and also connected that up with the radiesthesia research from France. So I'll just give you some illustrations of some of the things that are possible at different levels related to this.
Great.
So as you mentioned in your book, you go into many of the physiological effects, the power of red light therapy, etc. And there's a lot of information available about that today, so I won't spend time on that. But let's look at something like the power of the color orange.
Okay,
What's understood with the orange is that at an energetic level, orange has the power to purge toxic energy out of the human energy system. So, for example, if you train in the pranic healing system, as you're learning to send bioenergy from the body into a person's energy field, it's based on, at the higher levels, being able to project a particular color vibration from the human energy field into the body. And there's very precise combinations. So people tend to have a lot of dark, stuck energy in the energy centers of the body. So in their system, they would start by broadcasting the green energy quality, because what does green do at an energetic level? It starts to break up toxicity. Now, we see the same thing with the impact of green as it manifests in nature. If you're going to be on some type of detox diet, you'll almost always be taking in super green foods.
Yeah, cilantro and chlorella and all.
It'll literally start breaking up toxic concentrations in the body, and it will then help to pull and flush it out of the body. And so from a purely energetic level, in pranic healing, they can project the green prana, and it will start to loosen and break up the toxic concentrations in the body. And then in safe areas of the body, because the orange quality can be very penetrating and very powerful, they'll broadcast the orange quality in, and that forces the body to purge. So if you were to actually test energetically a person's body just before they purge something from their body, you'll see that there's always a buildup of the orange vibration first. A person's about to vomit, you'll see a strong concentration of orange buildup in the stomach. If they're about to urinate, you'll see the buildup of the orange in the urinary bladder. Same thing for the colon if they're about to defecate, etc. But it can also be used to send out from the body any type of toxic energy that's embedded within the body. Now, this can also have a particular impact if you were to apply it at, let's say, the spiritual level. So one thing that can be done and used by advanced healers and spiritual adepts is if a person is in a death process and they're somewhat stuck in the physical body trying to get out, and they're suffering, and this is not something that's going to help them to stay in the body any longer. It's just going to extend their suffering. So what can be done is that the orange color can be used to help to release or expel the spirit from the body itself at the time of death. So in my online class, The Universal Vibrational Spectrum, I go through all the colors of the spectrum and give beginning indications of what effect does that have at the physical level, the emotional mental level, and at the spiritual level. Now, there's further we can take this, but this does become a system that can be used for creating specific vibrational effects, again, at any level of structure, physiological, consciousness, and even at particular spiritual activities. So I'll give you another example, in this case using an energy quality that is not as well known, but is within the color spectrum. There's a particular vibrational power that the French researchers discovered when they began to test the energies coming from old Egyptian ritual objects and from the designs of their temples and things like this. They had found that they were able to find this universal vibrational spectrum that applies to all these quality scales, and it had all the colors of the visible spectrum, the red through the violet, and then the red goes to infrared, the violet goes to ultraviolet. And they started out with a straight line bar, but then they realized, no, this needs to become a circle. And then it goes from the ultraviolet to the white, from the infrared to the black, and then that was 11 bands of energy. And then there was a mysterious hidden 12th band. And they're like, what is this 12th band? And so they developed particular radiesthesia tools that have particular angles and features on them that will begin to move in resonance with these different energies, including this invisible band. And when you were to arrange the colors in a circular spectrum, they found that this mysterious hidden vibration, or color, so to speak, that is mostly invisible, but if it was to manifest physically, it would manifest as a gray color. And it's because human beings have not yet developed a sense organ to perceive this color. And just as a colorblind person will see all colors as shades of gray, all human beings are at the stage of development now that this mysterious 12th color can only be perceived as gray at this point.
It's like the color of Wi-Fi. We can't see it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. It's mostly invisible. But if it was to manifest physically, you'd see it as gray. And so what they referred to it as, and this confused people a lot, is negative green, because it was directly opposite the green in the spectrum. So green is the central color of the 7 color bands. It's the one in the middle. And so that's why in many types of color therapy, green is used to restore equilibrium. It restores harmony and balance. People aren't harmed by green. All of nature is green. We feel balanced by it because it's the central part, geometrically, of a 7-fold system. It's the balance point in the center. But in a circular array, directly opposite it would be this negative green energy. Now, negative doesn't mean it's necessarily bad, and it doesn't appear as green. It's just the opposite polarity to what we think of as the green. So what they found out about this mysterious 12th color band that was connected to this powerful vibration used in the Egyptian temple science, and then they found it was used in other traditions as well. They found its use in India, they found its use in Easter Island, all kinds of things. Again, this work has almost been forgotten today. They found that the negative green energy had a tremendous power to broadcast energy straight through solid objects. And that's the way that it was used in many traditions. So this negative green energy, they found, could penetrate thicknesses of lead that cannot be penetrated by X-rays. And they had ideas about the way that in ancient Egypt, they could send information and energy over large distances using negative green broadcast. And if you actually test energetically modern electromagnetic communication technologies and things, what they're actually sending out on those waves would, from a vibrational perspective, be considered to be negative green. It's all a negative green modern technology that we're using a different frame of reference for. We no longer see how it pertains to all the other colors in the bands, but it's all part of the negative green spectrum. So negative green also becomes not only the carrier wave that sends energy and information straight through solid objects. If we were to understand it from modern physics, we would understand it in terms of the neutrinos that can pass straight through the Earth as if physical objects are invisible. It's an incredible energy known to the ancients and rediscovered. And now we use it also in Egyptian biogeometry from Dr. Karim, since we now know how to test it and how to apply it. But it does have a couple of sides to it. When it propagates as a wave in a particular way, it is something that is related to the movement of all life energy. So when they talk about Shakti energy transmissions in the Himalayas, where you're doing like a spiritual energy transmission, let's say from a guru to a disciple, and you're activating the whole system with this transmission, that's using the negative green ray. It can send the energy not just in terms of our modern technology with communication broadcast, but it also has a spiritual aspect. So some of the researchers at that time began to refer to it as not just a carrier wave, but as a spiritual carrier wave. They even did research that found that the more of this energy you build up in your energy system, the more advanced the person is spiritually. That the spiritual carrier wave has built up more and more in the energy body. Dr. Karim took this work much further later on in biogeometry and clarified a lot of the principles, and also made it much safer because whereas the one form of transmission of the negative green energy leads to all beneficial life energy transfer in the world, including the Shakti transmissions, a different form of transmission of the negative green energy is related to death forces and taking things out of physical existence. And so it could be manipulated in particular ways, just like electromagnetic technology can be used to create electromagnetic weapons and things like this. So it becomes a deeper topic. But I wanted to bring this in that when we're dealing then with an expanded view of color therapy as one quality scale, that this research that's almost been forgotten was done that found this complete spectrum that included the mysterious hidden energy from the Egyptian temple science, which we can actually understand, test, and apply today, as is done in biogeometry, and begins to point to the understanding of these energies in the ancient traditions.
Wow, that's wildly fascinating. What about blue? You're wearing all blue today, right? So, and I don't want to go through all the colors; it would take too long. But I'm just feel the kind of nudge to ask about the color blue and how that affects the body and mind psyche. So.
Yes. So the blue is a very interesting color that's starting to move to what some of the color therapists would say toward the cooling colors rather than the heating and activating colors. So red, orange, yellow, more heating, activating. Green is in the center. Then as you go to blue, indigo, violet, it's more toward the cooling. But one of the particular fascinating aspects of blue is that they actually use blue light therapy for particular types of physiological illnesses, such as the buildup of bilirubin in the body. And this, particularly they find in the Amish population, based on genetics and things, there's particular chemical functioning of the body that's impaired. And they'll put infants under blue light therapy because it helps to clear out some of these chemical concentrations that would be toxic otherwise. Another very fascinating part of the blue light is that blue light can be used in advanced esoteric purposes to be able to hold energy in place, to lock it in place. So often if you were to broadcast energy into a person, place, or thing, that energy will have an impact at the time you broadcast it, but it will begin to wear off over time. But what the blue can do is that the blue can help to create a type of energy field that locks the energy in place for a longer period of time. It works as a type of stabilization. So really for all the colors, they have a whole variety of different functioning. But that would be one aspect of.
So it seems from a practical application, if you were going to design a new modern temple, a new mystery school temple, which I'm endeavoring to explore this concept, you could have a transformational process under the guidance of one of these other colors. Could be green, could be orange, could be red, could be something designed to create an effect, one of these in the body, and then finish with the integration in the blue light to help anchor and integrate all of the different transformational processes that occurred. So you could switch the light spectrum depending on the phase of transformation in the process.
That's a very good idea. Absolutely, because these things are all alchemical cycles, and so different colors would come in at different parts of the cycle. In the Universal Vibrational Spectrum online class, I have a part that I was really inspired to include in it, which is taking people in an inner journey through all of the 12 vibrational bands in the Universal Vibrational Spectrum, which again can also manifest as color, and to experience how each one of them arises at a particular evolutionary stage of a complete cosmic process, starting from the negative green, going into the black of the darkness, into the infrared as the movement and heat is beginning to generate, into the red as the stimulation for life is formed. And then you go through every one of the bands, and it's actually a profound spiritual experience, what every one of those bands has as a evolutionary cycle. Now, there's also the part of this in creating a new temple, which is a topic I absolutely love, which is, of course, if we go back to classical Tantra, that classical Tantra uses things like sound and color and all of these things. And it's all about opening up the five senses. So a lot of the classical Tantra is about how do you open up the five senses to create maximum pleasure, maximum activation. So the most beneficial possible taste, smells, color, sounds, physical sensations and feeling, things of this kind, bringing all of that together into a temple space that opens people up. And again, with modern technology, we have a lot of potentials we didn't have before. Then, of course, we have to bring in the aspect of the sacred geometry, of the shape information.
Sure.
Now, a tremendous amount of the work that we do with Dr. Kareem's biogeometry, it has to do with how we use shape information to create concentrations of particular types of energy. So we can create the vibrational effect of a particular visible color, not just through using colored light or representations of the color through pigment, but through particular shapes that emanate a vibration. That's the same vibration as that color, but it's simply within the forms of the space. Now, there's a few secrets of this work, which is a vast topic of its own. I'll just touch on a few really key things here. One of the most important things is that, of course, you can't build the temple space in an abstract location. You need to find an existing power spot to build on. And so the building with its forms has to grow out of the power spot like a plant growing out of the earth. That way, it's channeling the power spot energy at that point on the earth into all the forms that are being created within the temple itself. So that's very important. If you didn't have a power spot, it is possible to create power spot energetics using biogeometry methods. But for any really important temple, just like in the ancient world, you'd want to find an existing power spot and then magnify it and channel it into all of the forms that are growing into the building, that everything's held inside of. Now, there's also the side of this that what we've been talking about so far in terms of color is the way it's conventionally thought of, which is that it's in a polarity system. So you have, for example, complementary colors, and they will say, well, like red and green are complementary opposites within the color spectrum, or orange and blue, or things like this. They have polarized energies. Same thing in color therapy, where you're going to get more of a stimulation, yang, activation energy from a red than you're going to get from a blue, indigo, violet types of things, yin and yang type of thing. Well, beyond yin and yang, which is the two opposite polarities, is going back to the original unity, the original one that everything comes from. And that's actually the focus of the biogeometry work. We can work with the polarized energies, but what biogeometry is actually all about is reconnecting to the original unified field energy, the unity energy, before the polarity split. And that's an energy that balances and harmonizes all living energy fields. And it has particular energetic components to it. If we were to look at the actual color spectrum, and there's actually work that we teach in biogeometry related to this, and we look at the different colors in the spectrum, in particular parts of that color, if we were to see it as a graduation, let's say in blue going from what started at the end of green, and then when it terminates at indigo, there's going to be particular sublocations, subbands within orange or green or blue that has a more powerful connection to the center, or a more powerful connection to what in biogeometry is called the BG3, or the one energy quality of the original unified field that balances and harmonizes energy. And so we can, through the proper use of shape or sound or color, etc., we can actually manifest not just a polarized effect of that specific color. We can actually use, in very precise ways, a part of that spectrum to manifest this universal healing, balancing energy, really the divine plane energy. So the way I represent it visually in the universal vibrational spectrum class is the point in the center of the circle. So the circle of the 12 bands of all the different vibrational qualities, which could be color or they could be sound or could be whatever, that universal vibrational spectrum, that's on the periphery. In the exact center is a gold spot. And the gold spot in the center is this unified field energy, beyond polarity to the original unity and, again, universal balancing, harmonizing force. That's the real secret of the ancient Egyptian temples, the real secret of biogeometry, and the basis for the practical techniques. So one thing I've been interested in for a long time is the application of the biogeometry techniques as a modern form of the Egyptian temple building science, and then connecting it up with the concepts of Tantra for the activation of the five senses and all these other things coming together. Because we now have the knowledge and the tools to do this at an incredible level.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. I'm
let's
on board.
Do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. All right. We made it. We made a promise to people. I wanted, and it's a desire of mine as well, to talk a little bit about the gemstones and crystals. And because everybody can go to a crystal shop and you can, if we go to Sedona, for example, we have a beautiful home in Sedona. You go to the crystal shop there, and every crystal has a card, and the card has some properties in it. But I'm always a little skeptical. I'm like, all right, who wrote this?
Yes.
Where did this come from? Is this real? Or is this just some woo-woo thing that somebody decided makes some sense? So what's like the most practical breakdown of how to work with crystals and which crystals you think are kind of most important? Again, tying us back to the Michaelic Age, or specific use case functions for, crystals or gems that we're actually working with.
Yes, great question. Again, starting from the big picture, the thing that is so significant for me about working with crystals and gemstones, which you find in every classical tradition, the Egyptian temple science did it. The Himalayan tradition is full of works with gemstones for healing, for even overcoming karmic challenges. They use them for what's called astral remedies, because they bring in particular vibratory forces that can counteract things that are detrimental in the person's karmic path that could manifest very negatively otherwise. And one of the most incredible systems that unfortunately we almost lost the secrets from, but is now being brought back, is in the Chinese Taoist tradition. Because when the communists took over China around 1949, they only kept in the true Taoist healing of Chinese medicine that occurred before that. They kept the part of it that was the acupuncture, and they kept the plant medicine. because I thought, well, the plant medicine is similar to the Western use of pharmaceuticals. And so we'll keep that in. But there was an entire, what they called stone medicine, a mineral medicine that was just as developed and advanced and complex as Chinese medical use of plants. But what happened is that they destroyed the Taoist temples, they killed many of the Taoist masters, and so a lot of the knowledge of the Chinese Taoist art of the use of stones for whether it's physiological healing or energetic healing or things to activate people at spiritual levels was almost lost. Now, luckily, there is a 88th lineage grandmaster of the Jade Purity lineage from China who lives in the United States, whose name is Jeffrey Yuan. And he's actually brought back the knowledge of the original Taoist stone medicine.
Fantastic.
In a way we didn't have access to before. And it's mind-blowing.
Sorry, communists. One of them escaped, and now we got the knowledge.
Exactly. It's unbelievable what he's teaching. So, and not to cast aspersions on anything, but a lot of what I see in the Western work with stones, it can sometimes be fairly superficial. What tends to be the overarching method used today is to use a system of analogy between the chakras and a color. And so that then leads to something like every stone that has a reddish or a pinkish hue to it is said to be a heart stone. And so it's sometimes amazing to see so many different stones say, oh, well, this stone is the heart stone, based on the color. Well, that's certainly true for something like rose quartz. It definitely is a heart stone. But if you go into the deeper aspects of things like the Chinese stone medicine, there's other stones within red and pinkish hues type of thing that do a lot of specialized functions outside of something that general. Mm-hmm. So a lot of what you find in the West is, again, just this very simple type
reductionist.
Some chakra to color correspondence, which can take you to a certain extent, but it really doesn't get to the level of specificity of the real science of it. So if we look at the ancient world, the ideas of the breastplate of Aaron, where the priest who's going to enter into the Holy of Holies at the Temple of Solomon has to wear a very specific breastplate just to survive the experience that has 12 gemstones in a very specific geometric matrix to create the stabilized energy field that makes it possible to enter into the Holy of Holies. Otherwise, the vibrational forces may not be endurable or survivable. And so throughout the ancient world, you see very precise use of the gemstones, not only for healing, but for various types of spiritual activation. So now to talk about specific stones. I like to test the stones with the radiesthesia that came from the French physical radiesthesists of the early 1900s and the work done today in the biogeometry work from Egypt. So I can actually test what the actual vibrations are coming from the stones. I actually had to apply that knowledge to create a new system to test stones because unfortunately in the last 40 years or so, there has been a tremendous toxification of the stone supply, including what you buy in rock shops and stone shops, crystal shops, because of the desire to deepen the colors of particular stones because they'll sell better if you do that. Mm-hmm. So this is done primarily through three methods, although they have a lot of different methods today in gemology to do it. That primarily is one that was also used in the ancient world, which is the application of dyes and colors to it, like a physical color to it. That can corrupt the energy of the stone, although it's not as toxic in some cases as the other methods. Next method, also used to some extent in the ancient world, but nowhere near as much as today, is to heat the stone. And through heating the stone, like for example, a lot of what you see sold in crystal shops today as citrine is nothing other than amethyst that's been heated in an oven to a specific temperature until it turned orange. And it's not true citrine at all. And it will not give you the energetic qualities of citrine. Mm-hmm. But people will pay more for it because citrine is a less common stone than amethyst is. So the heating is the second method. The third method is the most toxic and is pretty much restricted to modern times, and that is the use of nuclear technology to literally expose the stones to nuclear isotopes for a particular length of time. And that can change the stones to all types of colors. So today you can get...
We got GMO crystals in this world.
Oh, unbelievable.
Today. What the fuck?
There's so much of it.
I thought crystals were clear and clean, but we got fucking GMO crystals going around here.
It's unbelievable the amount of them that are either don't have the power that they had innately or that have become toxic due to the treatments, particularly the irradiation treatment. So today you'll see, for example, that you can buy diamonds in all types of different colors. Well, if they're not in a natural color of a diamond, all of those were created through irradiation. And the same thing is true for many other so-called semi-precious stones, that either they got the color to begin with from irradiation, so a stone that was originally colorless now has a very specific color, or it deepened the color, brightened the color tremendously. But the thing is that this didn't just weaken the innate power of the stone, it made the stone actively extremely toxic to wear. So a person might say, oh, well, I had to spend thousands of dollars for this aquamarine or whatever it might be, and look at the beautiful color of it. But if it had been irradiated, and now the person is wearing it as a pendant over their heart chakra, they're getting the toxic energy of that into their energy field the whole time they're wearing it. So this has been a lot of my work in the whole, again, what the Chinese call stone medicine field, is to make people aware, first of all, do no harm, and make sure that what you're spending a bunch of money on with the stones, because they're not cheaper after they apply these treatments. They're often more expensive, and they're highly toxic. So I actually created methods using the radiesthesia where any stone can be tested to see if it has the imprints from these toxic treatments. A person has to learn radiesthesia to do it, which is something that I teach both in specific classes and is connected to what we teach in the biogeometry work.
Everybody's thinking about their fucking crystal pendants right now and going like, oh, man, shit.
well, the minimum they can do is they can, if they know things like educational kinesiology, they can test to see if they're strong or weak for a particular stone. Don't assume that you'll be strong for it. But there is a lot of discernment needed today. I actually created my own website called purecrystal.com, P-U-R crystal.com, because I had so many friends in the Chinese medical field who were Chinese medical doctors that I was going to the trainings with Jeffrey Ewan with, and they knew that I had developed a method to be able to test these without spending thousands of dollars in a gemology lab to do the testing, which is the only other method to know. And so they said, oh, well, can you find one for me? And blah, blah, blah. So I ended up just starting a website, Pure Crystal, that allowed me to test myself and find the clean ones. I'd go to things like the Tucson Gem Show, and we reject the vast majority of the stuff because of all the treatments, and just find the ones that actually have the vibrational power and haven't had these toxic treatments, because that's so important. But let's talk about some of the stones then that are extremely powerful and significant for people to wear. Now, we can definitely use the idea of the universal vibrational spectrum and the colors for the energetic impacts. In more advanced levels of Chinese medical work in their stone medicine, or with the use of radiesthesia, we can actually test to see what particular stone for a person would be the most strengthening for a particular challenge that they have physiologically or health-wise, or that is connected to a particular organ or gland they're trying to strengthen, or even an acupuncture meridian, or whatever it is, what particular function you're looking for. But in a more general sense, there are particular stones that have very powerful beneficial qualities. Let's start with everybody's fundamental stone, which is pure clear quartz. So the function of pure clear quartz, as has been used for thousands of years, is that it works to be able to amplify whatever vibrations are already present in a system. So it works as a very powerful energy amplifier. So in the ancient world, they would find power spots, and they would put menhirs, quartz-bearing stones, on the power spot as a way to magnify it. Or you'd get a series of quartz-bearing stones and put it in a circle around the power spot as another way to try to magnify it, etc. Whenever you apply quartz to a power spot, whether it's in nature or it's on the human body, chakra, acupuncture point, something like that, a human power spot, you're going to amplify the energy there. And so the quartz in general will act as an energy amplifier, but it is not an energy transmuter. So you would not put it on a concentration of toxic energy. Some people are told today, oh, we can just get a plain clear quartz crystal and put it in front of your computer, and it will protect you from the toxic energy of the computer. I've tested this innumerable times, and I find it's not true, because what happens is that the quartz will amplify things for good or for ill.
Right.
And so what happens is that in a short period of time, the quartz will become completely infused with the toxic energy from the computer. And once it becomes completely infused with that energy, which can happen often within days, it will then start to actually broadcast that toxic energy outward. So it actually amplifies the toxicity.
So then how would you, let's say you've done that, someone's sitting at home going, oh, damn it, I got my quartz right in front of my computer. What do I do now?
So the easiest way to work to clear it is to put it under clean running water for a period of time.
Okay.
Clean running water can work. Now, some of the other methods people talk about is to put it in things like salt water, but I don't recommend using the salt water method. This is a larger story, but one of the most amazing modern masters of crystal technology was Marcel Vogel, who at IBM developed the foundation for modern computer systems by developing the magnetic coating that made hard drives possible. And he was a master of crystalline technology, including LCDs and things like that. And he developed what's known today as the Vogel crystal. So he said that with his extensive work with crystals, never clean them in salt water, because the salt water can destroy them and make them unusable. So to never clean them in salt water. The thing is that salt is a purative. Why? Because it has the green vibration in it. It doesn't look green, but the reason why salt acts as a purative is the green vibration. But salt in and of itself, if I was to get a green laser and I was to put a green laser on a crystal, that would clear it without having the toxic effect. But if you use the green vibration that's in salt, which might work for a person or for something else, what happens is that, and I learned this from the Chinese Taoist, is that the salt can work to actually pull the water that's inside the stone out of it. And all living systems use water to conduct chi energy. So if you get dehydrated, you can't conduct the chi energy. If you apply too much of the salt water to the stone or put it on salt, what can happen is that it starts to suck the water out of the internal matrix of the stone.
You get a desiccated stone.
Exactly. And it just doesn't have the juice anymore.
Yep.
So I don't recommend using the salt water.
So we got green lasers, we got running water. What about solar and lunar light? There's a lot of people talk about those.
That can be, yes, that can be used for charging. And
so charging is different than purifying.
There can be a purification aspect from the sunlight, more so than from the moonlight. If you test that, you'll see that moonlight has a charging with that yin lunar energy, which is particularly good for stones that are connected to yin lunar energy, many of which have names that are connected to like moon goddesses, so things like selenite or moonstone or things like that. But it doesn't have as much of a cleansing effect, particularly for a lot of modern electromagnetic energy and things that toxify stones. The sunlight can have a bit of a cleansing effect, as well as charging it with that more yang type of energy. But you have to be careful with the sunlight, because again, if it's out in the heat and the light too often, you'll see very commonly if you go to things like the Tucson Gem Show, people have these outside tables that they leave out in the strong desert sun all day, every day. And so what was originally a very bright, beautiful purple amethyst is now a very dim violet. And so again, you've dried it out, and not only has it lost its visible color, that's been weakened, but the energy of it has been tremendously weakened, and you can't bring it back.
Yeah.
There's no way to get that back into it once it's been dried out in the sun. So it has to be for a specific period of time. Don't leave it there too long. And this is more true for stones that have colors in them than it is for clear stones. A clear stone could be left for longer, but you don't want to leave any stone out in the sun all the time. It'll dry out. And also there's the method some people use of burying them in the earth. And that can be fine, that the earth could work for a particular type of cleansing or for even some level of recharging. But the challenge with that is that if you don't know how to test the energies that run in the earth, there's a lot of toxic earth energy lines running through the earth today. And if you stick the stone in a place in the earth that has a toxic earth energy line, it'll just get more toxic. You have to know where in the earth to put it. That's got a clean energy to it. So all of these are things I could teach people all the ways to do it, but they're more involved. And there's various types of tools people could have that work to clear things more effectively. But that's some basics to it. Now, unfortunately, when people ask me questions, how do I clear the irradiation or the heating of the stone or something like that? The answer is you can't. You can't turn that heated amethyst that now looks like a fake citrine. You can't turn it back into an amethyst.
Right.
You can't go the opposite way. And same thing for an irradiated stone. You can't really get rid of that toxic irradiation aspect. I actually do know a method to do it, but it's quite involved. It'll get rid of the toxic energy, but it still doesn't bring back the original energy.
Right.
That's gone.
All right. I'm going to be selfish here, and I'm going to go in a lightning round of stones that have been of particular importance to me.
Yes. Okay.
All right. So in a unbelievably powerful ayahuasca vision,
yes,
I went through a deep encounter with the dark forces and emerged and entered into this angelic realm. And I was gifted a breastplate that had a giant opal in the center and a crown which had an opal in the, well, it was kind of like more like a band than a crown, but it was like a headband of golden headband with an opal. And I saw that very clearly, and I was flying with the angels and the eagles, and it was this beautiful experience. So opal has become a very, like fire opal in particular, the one that, shines a light. What are some of these properties of this stone that I encountered in this experience that seem to be really powerful to me? So opal's my first question.
Yeah, so opal is a stone that was really revered by shamanic cultures in multiple parts of the world because it contains a type of inner light and fire. Now, this particularly will activate things toward the astral level, so in the astral body of a human being, which becomes things related to the emotional and mental body, up to the spiritual level, that whatever is toward the more spiritual impact of whatever color the opal gives, because opal can have many different types of colors, then whatever is the spiritual impact of that color has a type of living quality to it that gets activated in the person for spiritual connection purposes. That'd be a shamanic view of it. Also, from a Chinese Taoist view, opal is a stone that is very water-rich, and that helps the circulation of energy. So the general energetic impact of it can be very strong because it helps to increase the flow of qi and of energy wherever that's become stagnant.
All right. Next lightning round. This is a very special ring of mine. It has silver, gold, and turquoise.
Yes.
So the turquoise stone, tell me about that.
Yeah, so turquoise is a stone that I haven't worked with extensively, so I can't say too much about it. But it is one of these stones that is connected to the colors that you see with it, the blue-green types of colors, used in many different types of spiritual traditions. And it is a stone that can help to strengthen and fortify particular parts of the internal spiritual energetic structure of a human being. But I haven't done enough direct research with it to, from my perspective, tell you which exact parts of the structure are being strengthened with it. But it is something very powerful. You just have to be careful with turquoise today in that it is a stone that tends to fragment and to have cracks and things in it. So it will sometimes get artificial treatment with glues and resins and oils and things of that kind.
Right.
So you want to keep an eye out for that.
All right. Fair enough. I wear this necklace, and this is the bougiest, fanciest necklace that I can have, but it has, for me, the most spiritual activating power, despite being kind of blingy in its nature. So it's gold chain, and so I want to talk about gold as well, and we'll segue into that. Yes. That was something you brought up as well, and then diamonds on the sword itself. So the sword, Michaelic in that, so it's a very powerful symbol for me.
Yes.
And then diamonds on that, and it's all wrapped in the gold. So what about diamonds? I mean, a lot of people wear a diamond on their finger all the time, especially women.
Yes.
So what about diamonds? I mean, diamonds are a very special stone.
I think one of the best perspectives on it comes from the Chinese Taoist perspective, and that is they're looking at the hardness scale. And so when things are lower on the hardness scale, they tend to be linked to energies going through a process of transmutation or changing energy from one state to another. As you go up the hardness scale, diamond is the hardest. It's like 10 on the most scale of hardness. And so what the diamond is understood to be used for by the Chinese Taoist is that it helps to lock a particular energy in. So whenever you're wanting to lock a particular type of energy in, using this type of very hard stone, sapphire would be another one that's very hard, although a little bit less hard than the diamond. So it tends to have the type of brilliance and clarity with that type of white light energy that you have with the clear stones, and it works to lock in and solidify a particular type of energy that you want to lock in place. Now, sometimes they'll say that this you need to be careful with this when people have things like diamond rings. They'll say you can often find people who have been married for a long time and they haven't cleansed the stones that they're wearing, and there's a lot of toxic energy built up from the relationship that's getting locked into the diamond.
Sure. That
the diamond's kind of locking in toxicity from the relationship into their body through wearing that.
So be careful buying diamond rings at a pawn shop.
Yes, that's definitely the case.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, I wear this, you know, it's over a little bit lower. So it's a little bit going into the solar plexus, but near my solar plexus heart center. And to me, it seems to lock in that essential nature of who I am.
Yes.
So it's a kind of, I remember myself when I wear this necklace more than anything else. And I think it's a combination of the gold and the diamonds, but I can feel it.
Yes.
And so, you know, I'm probably one of the few people who in shamanic work is wearing a gold and diamond chain, right? Obviously, you see this, you know, it's like what rappers wear, but nonetheless, I'm like a spiritual rapper. And I have this stone, but I've really felt this particularly strong power from it, and it's been helpful. So if we switch, and I would love to talk about a billion other stones, but you have a whole course on gemstones and minerals. And
let me just throw a few out there that may be useful for people.
Let's go that, and then we'll go into metals.
So one of the other things that I learned from the Chinese Taoists is that iron-bearing stones are fantastic for pulling energy down the body to help to ground and to strengthen the energy in the body. So, for example, things like hematite. Now, what they caution against buying the type of hematite at a rock shop that has been magnetized. They'll have these little displays in crystal shops where there's pieces of natural iron hematite, and they are magnetically attracted together. That's changing the natural dynamics of the stone. It's a little bit too strong a charge to be wearing on your body all the time. It's best to get the natural type of hematite. You can buy it in the forms of rings, in the forms of bracelets, anklets, these types of things.
What about meteorites? I mean, meteorites is another great form of iron, right?
So it has...
That's what I wear. I have a meteorite ring on my finger.
Oh, fantastic. So particularly meteoric iron is understood by the Rosicrucians as the stone of Michael.
Let's go!
They will actually create ingestible forms, homeopathic remedies from meteoric iron that people take internally to strengthen their spiritual Michaelic will forces. But also it's something that you can wear or have in the environment. The meteoric iron is in a sense a direct activation of the will forces from the Michaelic being itself. But in general, using the hematite is something that in Western people, we tend to carry too much energy up in the head. So this can, when we carry it up in the chest, it leads to heart palpitations and heart issues. If it comes up into the head, then we get overagitated. It's hard to sleep. It's hard to relax, hard to stop the mind, things like this. And so what the Taoists understand is that particularly if you're going to rest, if you're going to sleep, or even in general to get strengthened in the physical body, you need to pull the energy down. You can't store energy safely here. You can't store it safely here. You can store it in the lower abdomen, what they call the lower dantian, the lower elixir field. That's where you can store energy safely. And you got to pull the energy all the way down the legs into the earth. One thing that will create that effect of pulling the energy from where there's too much of it up here and it needs to get anchored lower to ground you, what will do it automatically is wearing hematite on the body. So things like hematite bracelets, things like that, hematite necklaces, they can be used for that purposes. Very, very useful. Another stone that's very useful is the smoky quartz. But you got to be careful with smoky quartz. I want to warn people about this because today you can find in a lot of crystal shops, the darker the smoky is, the more they can sell it for. So they're irradiating the crap out of smoky quartz today. And anytime you see a smoky quartz that looks like it's almost painted black, avoid that like the plague. It's incredibly energetically toxic, very detrimental to wear. So don't buy any smoky quartz that it looks like it's deep black or painted black. Most all that stuff is irradiated. But if you get something that's like the lighter brown color, particularly if it has some variations in it, where some parts are almost transparent and other parts are a bit smoky, usually that hasn't been tampered with. So one of the things that the Taoists know about the smoky quartz is that it strengthens the Jing energy in the human body. So it's understood that we have three treasures in Chinese medicine. The qi, which is like the fuel life force that you're burning on a regular basis. The Jing, that is your core life force, that once you've emptied it, there's no more and you're gone. And then there's the Shen, which is your mental, spiritual energy and ability. So the Jing is your core life force. You're only alive for as long as you have Jing. You only have sexual power for as long as you have Jing. So everybody wants to preserve their Jing and strengthen their Jing. So that's one thing that the smoky quartz does, is it helps to consolidate and to strengthen the Jing in the body by wearing smoky quartz. Now, another aspect of this comes with the use of beryl. So beryl stones, particularly aquamarine, but it could also be emerald. But the problem with emerald is most of them today are treated and they're super expensive.
Right.
So you can get an untreated aquamarine for a lot less. These are beryl stones, and beryls have a very specific energetic quality that the Taoists talk about, that as a person gets older, it's very beneficial to wear beryl, particularly aquamarine, because what it does is it does help to preserve and consolidate the Jing in the body, and to keep it strong as it ages over time. Then I'm going to end up, again, we could talk about a lot of different stones, but just very quickly, there's two really significant stones that most people don't have on their radar, that I want to make people aware of. One is called sugilite, and sugilite is a beautiful purple stone. It has aspects where the Taoists use it as the best stone for healing any type of damage to the female reproductive system, whether it's sexual trauma, emotional trauma, anything of that kind. Beautiful purple stone, sugilite, but you just have to be careful because today it got very popular because it's so beautiful, and it's hard to find high-quality sugilite that's not at a super high price. It also, more esoterically, can be used for kundalini activation in the body, and something called kundalini burn that can help burn through certain disease processes in the body. Then the last one I'll mention is one called
Kujilite navel piercings. It's a trend. We started it.
And then the last one I want to mention is one called phenakite. And phenakite is spelled with a PH at the beginning. Not a well-known stone, but it is actually another variation connected to the beryl family. And again, it's quite rare around the world. The best quality of it comes from Myanmar, Burma. But there's also some reasonable qualities of it that come from Colorado, Russia, Central Africa, things like this. But the phenakite is something you don't hear talked about very often. But in my experience and my testing of it, phenakite is literally white light from the divine plane that is crystallized into physical space. And within certain circles of crystal and mineral work, they know that phenakite is it's the bomb. It's unbelievably powerful.
Wow.
Because it is rare. It can cost a little more, but nothing like what it would cost if people knew what it actually was. So it's worth spending a couple $100 on a good phenakite. So again, the phenakite, because it is the crystallization of white light from the divine plane into physical reality, it has a beneficial effect on the whole body and energy field when you wear it. or if you put it on any energy center of the body, acupuncture point, chakra, whatever it is, it will activate and illuminate that point immediately. And it's extremely useful, extremely powerful. I know people that really understand crystal work that spent amazing amounts of money buying big pieces of phenakite from Brazil or other places that they have in a location because the energy emanation of it is so powerful.
Phenakite stock is going through the roof right now. We've just moved the market for phenakite here today on the podcast. Thanks so much for all of this info. I'm definitely going to be looking into sugilite and phenakite and these different things. And I'm glad to know you so that when I encounter
Absolutely.
these,
Let me know if you have any questions.
Just from to zoom out to the macro, like how glorious that we've manifested a world that has all of these things of incredible beauty. Again, going back to Tiferet, incredible beauty.
Yes.
You can get lost in the beauty of these. And I think we appreciate that. And that's part of the value that have always been given to these gems. And then the properties that come from them and the vibrations and frequencies. It's just a wonder, the world that we live in.
It's incredible. And the thing that always strikes me about the mineral kingdom is that I always think of the mineral kingdom and stones as being the library of divine vibrations that have crystallized into physical reality and that we have available to us in a stabilized form. Because plants only maintain their power until the volatile oils dry up. Animals and human beings are constantly changing their vibration based on their emotional moods and reactions. But a mineral can hold a specific vibratory power for millions of years in a stable form. So I think of the mineral kingdom as our stable library of divine vibrations that we can access. And it's just like you say, it's spread out in the world in front of us.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, metals. We're going back to,
Yes.
I want to talk again about gold because our first conversation was really illuminating. So let's talk about golds and then see, I'm also very curious about the different properties of silver versus platinum.
Yes.
In the different qualities there. But let's go gold, silver, platinum, and then maybe copper as well to cover that kind of basis.
So the fundamental aspect of gold in every classical tradition is that gold is understood to be literally, not metaphorically, but literally a crystallization of the energy field emanation from the sun into physical reality. Now, normally we deal with this idea today of like, oh, well, gold is the metal of the sun. Like it's a metaphor because it's yellow and it doesn't tarnish and these kinds of things. But no, it was understood originally that this is the literal crystallization of the solar power, the solar force. So it is very connected to Archangel Michael, is very connected to the Christos. It's connected to everything with the solar empowerment process, the solar initiation. And so gold is a very powerful metal to wear. Now, you'll find that in classical gemology, certain stones will be more powerful set into a particular metal. And so I just always test for myself using radiesthesia to see what stone wants to be in what metal to strengthen its effect on the body. Mm-hmm. But the thing about the gold, if we take it further, is that gold as an energy is something that is incredibly alchemical. One of the things that really struck me from the pranic healing system from the Philippines is that they understand that, we have the chakra system, which is actually not just in the front of the body, but both front and back chakras. They act like vortices that come from the front and the back, and they meet toward the center of the body. And so when they work with the front and back chakra of a person, there can sometimes be not just the need to pull out the toxic energy from the person and then put in the beneficial strengthening energy, which is usually done using color pranas that they're projecting. But if there's really serious damage, what happens is that in the very epicenter of the chakra, it's like a delicate, thin etheric webbing, and it can get torn, almost like a spider's web. Mm. And it's very, very difficult to heal when that etheric webbing is torn. A lot of times when people have very deep dysfunctions in their energy body or psychology, it's because of tears to the core of the etheric webbing in the chakra. And again, difficult to repair. But what they found is that what repairs it is gold prana. gold is the energy that will actually work to heal and to reseal that delicate etheric webbing in the interior of the chakra. So gold has this incredible type of healing energy for like the deepest, most sensitive things related to that solar power. Gold also has the aspect that it is one of the hallmarks of what Dr. Karim originally found in Egyptian biogeometry, because of course they use gold in ancient Egypt and all these other cultures, that when he was looking at what are the vibrational components that indicate the energy of the divine, that unified field energy, rather than just the different color bands in the polarized world of energy functions. All of the color bands do different, precise, specific things. They're all the different functions or siddhas coming from the divine that move into the world, but they're polarized in their qualities. The unified field energy doesn't do different specific things. It does one thing, and that it connects everything back to the whole, everything back into the unified field. It balances and harmonizes everything back to the center. So that's very powerful. So gold is the actual vibrational hallmark that you find in a person's energy field when they connect to the divine. That's why you see in every tradition that when a person is a saint or they're doing a powerful spiritual practice or whatever it might be, that they show the gold aura around the head or around the head and the entire body. And that is the vibrational signature that they've connected to the divine. And that gold, again, is connected to the sun, which is the center of the solar system, which connects to the Godhead and the divine. So it's all linked together.
I got to show you something that's really cool. So we're entering this Michaelic Age. Things are transforming and changing. And there's been a modern innovation that has allowed gold, fully assayable, recoverable, 24-karat gold, to be printed in golden notes to be used as currency.
Oh, I love it.
And you can't call it currency because there's regulations on it, but it can be used similarly as that in these fractional ways. And different countries and states are now adopting this. And I'm involved in a project where we're creating a mint, blending beautiful art with these golden notes. And I just see this. I have this vision of the future. What if all of our currency was actually gold?
Absolutely. I've done a lot of study of that topic, as I'm sure you have, and I'm absolutely so happy to see this. This is fantastic. I mean, this is so beautiful and so profound. Of course, you're going to have the central banks try to stop this, but this is what makes so much sense.
Yeah, it really does make sense, right?
I'm so happy to see that.
So
thank you.
As soon as we get some of our the company's called Metal Mark, based on the Metal Mark butterfly. So it's about the transformation of what we think of the monetary system. So Metal Mark, and of course metal. It's the butterfly mixed with the metal. So we have our own mint, and
I love it.
Partnered with some incredible artists, and we're coming out with that as well. But when I saw that, I was like, this makes a lot of sense. And certainly our first conversation about these qualities of gold then made me even more excited about this project, because it's a way also for fractional gold. I mean, that's been one of the challenges. The smallest coin you can typically get is 1 gram. A gram, depending on the spot price, $60 to $70 for a tiny thing that's smaller than the size of a dime. But with these notes, they're pounded out thin, and then they're able to actually print on them through this proprietary process.
Wow.
And so you can get fractional gold, 1/200th of an ounce or 20 milligrams or however much you want to do, but actually have it fully tradable and collectible. And it's a really cool technology.
I love it. It makes so much sense. I'm so happy to hear about it.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll have to get you a supply.
Yes.
All right. So moving on from gold.
Silver. Okay.
Yeah.
So again, classically, gold and silver always come as a pair.
Sun and moon, right?
Sun and moon, absolutely. Again, understood classically that silver is the literal crystallization of the energy emanation of the moon power, the lunar power, not just a metaphor. Now, silver is very interesting because whereas we see this type of healing of subtle etheric structures and things coming from the gold and a signature of connection to the divine, what silver has on the other side is something that is linked to protection of what is good and beneficial by destroying what is toxic. So what we know is that virtually any pathogen will be killed immediately upon direct contact with silver. And that's how come in ancient times, if someone was wounded in a battle or something of that kind, part of their skull was removed and their brain was exposed, they would put a silver coin there because it would stop any type of toxic process happening. It wouldn't get infected.
It's also where from my understanding, where people say you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth, that was related to the plague, from my understanding, because actually people who were eating off silverware would get actually small micronized parts of that silver into their bloodstream and system, which would actually help protect them from the plague in a certain way.
Absolutely.
And again, this could probably be challenged, but this was the idea about eating off of silverware.
Absolutely. I mean, when I was in the Marine Corps nuclear biological chemical warfare defense area, we would hear about they were trying to find pathogens that they couldn't find any antidote for, but they found that virtually every biological pathogen would be killed by silver. Silver is an incredible full spectrum antibacterial, antiviral, does unbelievable things. So, same thing if they were on a long ocean voyage, they would put a silver dollar in a barrel of water to make sure that the water didn't become toxic on a long voyage.
Wow.
So silver is so amazing for killing pathogens. Then it was discovered in the modern research into microcurrent therapy, which is itself a fantastic, amazing field where they've discovered the frequencies for all types of biological functions. We don't hear as much about it as we should. That's because the people that are doing the great work in it don't want to get shut down by the usual AMA,
three-letter agencies,
FDA types of thing.
Yeah.
So, but it's incredible what they can now do with microcurrent therapy. And so some of the original research coming from Robert Becker, that you can read about in his book called The Body Electric when he worked for the Veterans Administration. And he discovered how he could actually regenerate body parts. He has a patent that you can find attributed to Robert Becker, and it shows you in the patent a person that's had a finger severed at a particular knuckle. And then by applying a particular microcurrent frequency through silver, and you have to have silver as the electrode, it would activate the stem cell activity, and they show you over a period of a few months them regrowing the entire finger back.
No way.
Absolutely.
Wow.
I actually have pictures of it. I have the particular patent that he had, but you can find this on the internet. It's available publicly. Look up Robert Becker and work with microcurrent therapy, and you'll find his patent that actually shows you the photographs of the regeneration. And that's because the silver then gets connected to the stem cell activity, and it's all programmed according to the electromagnetic frequency. So this is an incredible body of work, but the silver was really significant in all of this research to create the regenerative capacity. So not only does it kill what's detrimental, it works for the regenerative capacity as well. Now then you have the pair of the silver and the gold. The gold doesn't kill things, but the silver does. They're like these complementary things working together. And what's interesting is that you can get actual physical silver and gold, and if you put them on opposite polarities of the human body, you will feel an energy flow between them, because whenever two opposite polarities are in close proximity to each other, they will always exchange energy and information. This can be done with certain types of stones that are opposite energetic polarities too, but that's a larger topic. In this case, you can get a piece of gold and you can get a piece of silver. And I'll give you an example for opposite polarities, like the crown and the perineum, or the front and back chakras. One really good place to try these energetic things on, because it's a pretty solid and stable energy system, is putting something like, let's say, a piece of gold or a piece of silver on your navel, and then putting the opposite metal on the place on your back directly opposite the navel. The place on your spine directly opposite the navel is an energy center in Chinese medicine called the Ming Men, and it's understood to be the master controller of energy in the human body. And so in pranic healing, they'll have certain types of energy emanations, particularly with red emanations, to the Ming men to vitalize the entire body almost immediately. It's very, very powerful. But anyway, if you use gold and silver pairs and put them on the two opposite ends of any opposite polarities on the human body, whether they're the opposites at the horizontal level with the chakras or the top-bottom, then you'll often feel the powerful energy flow coming from them. What I always have people do when they try that is try it with gold in front, silver in the back, then silver in the front, gold in the back, see which feels more comfortable to you.
Cool.
But very often people can feel that energy flow between the two of them. This would then get connected to things like the Ida and Pingala channels in the body. In fact, the term Hatha Yoga means basically sun-moon yoga, and the sun and moon manifest through the gold and silver, both used in Ayurvedic medicine in the Himalayas for all kinds of healing and activation purposes. And so it could also be linked to the gold and silver in the movement of the energies going up either side of the spine, and even creating the caduceus crossing creates all of this energetic charge in the human body.
So I have a wedding ring. So again, I'm showing all my jewelry here because I'm just being a little selfish, but it's gold.
Yeah.
It's gold with a silver band that's wrapped around it.
Nice.
And I was allured to this in particular. What happens when you stack them instead of them being on opposite parts of the body, but these are stacked and
yes,
I wear it every day?
They did that in Egypt. In fact, they used electrum, which was a kind of naturally occurring alloy of gold and silver. And so you can combine them together. Lots of times people today think of this in terms of the work of Wilhelm Reich with orgone energy, where you would have organic and inorganic materials in plates with one another to create an orgone accumulator and to strengthen energy. This can also be done with various types of plating. My late friend Slim Sperling, who created the Slim Sperling rings and light life technology, he was a blacksmith who would put into physical form using silver or gold or copper plated with silver or copper plated with gold or copper plated with silver and gold, sacred geometric forms with these metals, and they would move energy very, very powerfully for particular purposes. So yes, you can bring them into direct contact and use them as plating layers. Quite a few things you can do with it energetically.
Wow. All right. So just to wrap this up, copper, platinum. Yeah.
Okay. So platinum is such an amazing, fascinating metal. So in cutting edge areas of biohacking and energy healing, they talk about the platinum group metals and how the platinum group metals have remarkable effects on human consciousness, energy, healing. A lot of it's being researched today. So the platinum group metals include things like iridium and palladium, as well as platinum. And there's also efforts to make certain types of ingestible platinum group metals, or them occurring naturally in different forms. So one of the incredible things related to platinum is we need to also talk about palladium as another platinum group metal used with it. So the original types of free energy research done by Fleischmann and Pons, which was referred to as cold fusion, and led to all kinds of confusion and problems for them. But sometimes they would get massive releases of extra energy, and sometimes they wouldn't get any. But they were using platinum and palladium as anode and cathode in energy setups. And based on who did it and what time of day and where they did it, sometimes nothing would happen. Sometimes massive amounts of excess energy was created. And in one case, so much excess energy was created that it exploded and killed the experimenter.
Oh, boy.
But because it wasn't replicatable as the same thing every time, modern science has kind of like said, oh, well, it's all nonsense and we're not going to deal with cold fusion anymore. But this has to do with the energy principles. There's something that's very powerful within platinum and palladium. Both can be used to set stones and things in. So I found that particular types of stones work really well with platinum or palladium. Like, so for example, I mentioned a little bit ago about how powerful phenakite is as the crystallization of divine white light into a stone. And I found that one of the optimal ways to set it in metal is to have a jeweler put it in platinum. And that's like very, very powerful. But the platinum and palladium is also, the types of things that we use in a catalytic converter, and that actually turns the toxic exhaust from a car into something non-toxic. And that's why people tear apart catalytic converters, because you can get the platinum or the palladium out of that and you can sell it because it has value as a metal. But it's like, how does this metal turn something highly toxic into something non-toxic? I even found research done at Pennsylvania State University where they found out that they could turn all the toxic nerve gas stockpiles that all these different countries have that are now rotting and decaying and about to leak, that they could turn them into completely non-toxic compounds. And all they needed was to use water and a bit of heat and the metal palladium, one of the platinum group metals, and it would convert the most toxic chemical substance known to man, the nerve agent, into something completely biologically inert. So these are all things related to the potential power of platinum and the platinum group metals. A lot there. Then there's the copper. So whereas you have the sun and moon energies with the gold and the silver, you have the energetics for Mercury connected to the Venus, I'm sorry, not Mercury, but Venus, the Venus energies connected to copper. And so copper is not only this fantastic type of energetic electrical conductor, it's also something that's been used in spiritual traditions for a long time to connect to the Venusian energies related to beauty and perfection, things of this kind. So copper becomes a really good, stable basis for energy conduction. And so in things like Chinese medicine, they'll put stones in copper as a way to conduct their energy more powerfully. So it does work as a very good basis for energy conduction whenever you use copper. And my friend Slim Sperling, who's creating his sacred geometric forms out of metal, would often use the copper. And that allowed, just like we use it in electrical circuits today, because electrons can move through it very easily. It's the foundation of our electrical circuits today. So it works dynamic biological life energy just as well as it works the electrical energy.
Wow. Dr. Gilbert, I feel like I could talk to you forever.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming here and sharing, just a fraction of the wisdom that you've accumulated over your lifetime of dedication. It's really just such an honor to be able to share the space and be a student with eager eyes looking and learning all of these different things. And I look forward to continuing this relationship into the future. And as I mentioned to everybody, vesica.org, VESICA.org. If you want to go deeper, I encourage you to do so, because you have an incredible library of information available there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I've loved being here with you again. Hope to do it more in the future.
We certainly will. If you're willing, I'm all in.
Absolutely.
I'm all in.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks everybody for this long and beautiful podcast. So much love, everybody. Goodbye. Thanks for tuning into this video. Make sure you hit subscribe. Follow me at Aubrey Marcus. Check out the Aubrey Marcus podcast, available everywhere. And leave a comment. Let me know if this video resonated or what else you would like to hear from me in the future. Thank you so much.